Good morning. I'd like to call this special council meeting to order. It's November 21st, 2024. We're dealing with a public hearing here today. We're reconvening from the meeting we held 2 days ago. We'll start with roll call, Madam Clerk.
Madam Speaker, Councillor Sharma, His Worship Mayor Gillingham, Councillors Allard, Rawadi, Chambers, Dobson, Duncan, Eadie, Gilroy, Lukes, Mays, Orlico, Rowlands, Santos, Schreier, and Wyatt.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And as always, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. Now, where we left off in our proceedings was we are now dealing with motions. There are a number of motions that have been circulated. And Mr. Clerk, if you could tell us how many there, and I think there's paper copies that have been circulated around to everyone.
Yes, Madam Speaker, there are, I believe, 7 motions that have been submitted by members of council. The package has been printed out and provided to the members this morning as well. The process next would be we have a motion on the table. Just to remind council, we do have a motion on the table from His Worship Mayor Gillingham to concur in the administrative recommendation. We do have amendments that are being proposed by members of council. So the process now would be to consider the motions, or rather have the movers of the motions speak to their motions, and all other motions and the item at that time. And then after we've heard from all of the movers, if there are comments from members of council on the motions and as on the item itself, they can speak at that time. And as always, members, questions of the administration could be asked at any time.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Gilroy?
Speaking to a one motion, is that considered your time to speak on everything at that time?
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, we'll start with you. You had a motion you were bringing forward. Councillor Eadie?
Do we have in this proceeding 5 minutes or 8 minutes?
So in keeping with the practice at Community Committee, Councillor, there's no time limits on on speaking, and also no limits on the amount of questions that you can ask.
That's correct. There'll be no clock on. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Making sure I understand how we're proceeding here. I did have, I made the 3 motions, and the most recent one was that the public service recommendation the recommendation of the public service be concurred in. Now, correctly, we are on to the 7 amendments, correct?
Yes.
I think we got, I just want to make sure we do have 7 here. 7 amendments, okay. Given that none of these amendments are my amendments, do I speak to this, or do the amenders speak to it first?
So the amenders would speak to it first. So we'll go through each motion and allow the movers to speak to their motions. And then again, at that time, they can speak to their motions, other amendments, and the item itself.
Okay, so it's actually probably not my turn to speak then.
Yeah. If you wish to speak, Mr. Mayor, you can, and we can certainly come back to you.
But I
as
can
well.
speak at the end, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You can speak at any time.
All right.
Okay.
I will. Okay.
A departure from this morning, that's right.
So
we
I can speak
anytime.
Can I speak at the beginning and the end?
Anytime.
Multiple times.
Any time during the
yes,
debate
that's right.
of these 7 motions.
All right,
yeah,
pack a
thank
lunch.
you.
Okay. I'll simply just say I want to thank my colleagues for the thoughtful amendments. I'm going to further review these, but I will be supporting amendments 1, 3, 5, 6, 7. I will not be supporting amendments 2 and 4, but we'll have more to say at the conclusions. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could you repeat the numbers, please, that you
Sure.
are in support of?
I just simply said I won't be supporting amendments 2 and 4, but will be supporting the other amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr.
Madam
Clerk?
Speaker, just to clarify, that motion 7, that's for item 2. So again, as council is considering all 3 items at the same time, as this is a combined hearing, so motions 1 to 6 propose to amend item number 1, and motion 7 proposes to amend item 2. which is the secondary plan amendment 6 of 2024, just for clarification for council.
Okay, but we are speaking to all, even though that's the case, we're speaking to all 7.
That's right.
Of
It's
the
a
amendments.
combined hearing.
Combined hearing.
It's a combined
you.
hearing today? Yes. Motion 1 was moved by Councillor Lukes. Your opportunity, Councillor Lukes, to speak.
Sure. Okay, so I'll just do a little bit of a preamble here. This is a motion to add a new section called bird-friendly window designs. So the department, as you know, we have, I don't believe it's called a policy, but we've got guidelines on how to deal with taller buildings and birds with the treatment of windows for the taller buildings. I don't know if Council knows, but there are 3 billion fewer birds in North America today than 50 years ago. Much of these losses are caused by human activities, also from predation by domestic cats, collisions with windows, and collisions with cars, vehicles. Winnipeg is on a major migratory flight path for birds, the Central Flyway. Ornithologists, those are people that study birds and watch birds, come from all over the world at various times of the year to add to their life list of birds. I know from a new building that was built at the University of Manitoba, a completely four-sided glass building, constantly picking up dead birds from around their building. I know from the tall buildings that went in on Pembina Highway, I had requested that the developers do glazing or treatment to the glass, which they did, and it's very effective. We don't have dead birds on. I mean, it's gross, but it's the way it is. So this is just basically an amendment to add a bird-friendly window design to buildings, exterior window treatments that must be applied to the exterior glass surface up to 16 meters above grade or to the top of mature tree canopy. So that's basically where the collisions occur. So that's the motion. There you go.
Thank you. Next is, just a moment. Councillor Orlico, motion 2.
Speak to the amendment, right? Just the amendment.
You can speak to your amendment. You can speak to any of the amendments before us, the main item. We can also come back to you.
Okay, so
Later.
I'll just focus my comments just on this amendment to keep things rolling. I'll speak about the overall at the end. Again, thank everybody for the comments we had at the meeting. It was incredibly long. You know how grumpy I get. But it did dawn on me as we were going through this, and I think it was Councillor Gilroy and Councillor Eadie who spoke quite clearly, that there is a concern about, and then we talked about affordability. So I understand the supply-demand economics model, which is being used to say this will increase supply this will increase supply, so therefore that will have a trickle-down effect and reduce costs down the line. I'm not so keen on that. I don't believe that's true, but again, that's what we've been told. And fair enough, we can disagree on that. But I was actually, and then also I realized that most of these bylaws, they're actually not going to be going into the inner city. I think mostly suburbia. Some of the outlying mature neighborhoods will get some of the development, Polo Park, for example. So we're going through that. So it's not really going where I think this whole plan should go and really focus on where we have the highest needs. But then I realized quite quickly, why don't we have any affordable housing criteria in here? And I'm talking about affordable, not affordable housing. That term it does get complicated, but below market value housing. Why is there some kind of inclusive zoning in this? This is a major opportunity to include where we do have a serious problem. That one, I don't think there's nobody's going to say that we don't have a serious problem, that there's too many people out there that are living below the margin income that cannot afford a place to live. So this, I don't believe, will help that part of it. Yeah, it will increase supply, but I don't think it's going to be increasing supply at a level of price that is, because where it's going and the high cost materials, that will actually deal with what I believe is the major problem in City of Winnipeg, is we need to find ways to have developers who are getting a very good deal on this one. Let's face it, they're not paying LDR, they're not paying payment for fee, they're not doing development fees, they're getting certainty, which they really love, and I appreciate that. They have a menu of options they can choose from. All great for the developers, but where is it for the people that really do need this housing? There's nothing in here really for them, and I don't see it. So it was a very nominal amount of 10%. In these buildings, that's all I was asking for, 10%. I wanted to do 25%, but I realized that definitely won't pass. But again, so I'll moderate down to 10%. So of the 2,700 whatever units, that's, a couple hundred units that could be actually, people could afford to live in there. And that also, instead of just putting all the affordable housing downtown or in the inner city, it will spread affordable housing out throughout the whole city of Winnipeg, which I think is really important too, on many social levels. So again, it's a minor 10%. I hear the mayor's already decided not to, before he even spoke. I appreciate that. Decided not even to consider it. But that's the way it is in the City Hall right now. So again, I understand that developers will profit very well from this. There will be an increased supply of housing on this, got that too. But I don't think we're really addressing the key issue we have in the City of Winnipeg is deeply affordable housing, even marginally affordable housing, so we can have people get moved to their house that right now can't. This present one, I don't believe is really going to help those people, which is the people I really am concerned about. So that's why I said just 10%, make it a little inclusive. So those are reasons why. I'll speak to the overall motion, though, the malls and corridors bylaw later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Duncan on your motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
If you
I'll speak to motion number 3 here. So this, as we heard and had a discussion the other night, identifies the Tuxedo Business Park on Kenniston Boulevard, as well as what's referred to commonly as the Kildonan Mile on Reindeers Drive, as potential areas for development. Speaking to the Tuxedo Business Park piece first, as strictly just a business park, this allows for residential development, and also to the Kildonan Mile along Reindeers Drive to allow for the inclusion of the PDO piece as well. I think, as we heard from the delegation, especially in some of the Q&A period with the delegation, specifically to my ward in Tuxedo there, this is not a industrial zone. This is not a heavy MMU zone. This is an area that is surrounded by commercial. This is an area that not too far away in Linden Woods has single-family homes. In the Seasons of Tuxedo has similar density. This will allow for potential residents there to live, work, and play. And I think that we have a unique opportunity here with this complete package in front of us to introduce that and to be innovative in some of the ways that we think about development in Winnipeg, and in particular, an opportunity here where at times in the Charles of Tuxedo Westwood ward, there is not that opportunity. So I welcome this opportunity, especially in the environment that we're in today. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Next is Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to provide an amending motion with respect to the HALF Accelerator Fund, malls and quarters, asking that Council consider the approved plans go back to Community Committee for the purpose of councillors being allowed to address some of the elements of construction, including building elevation, private approaches, garbage enclosures, fencing, landscaping, and freestanding signage. This will allow some input for councillors based on the voices that elected us, that will allow consistency in building new buildings that come along as a result of the Housing Accelerator Fund. It is important that we address some of these issues as developers provide plans to us that allows us to weigh in, that allows us to ensure that they're meeting with the standards that residents have come to expect in terms of this building process. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Motion 5, Councillor Brawadi, your opportunity to speak.
Much, Madam Speaker. This motion fills in a small gap that's sort of created by this new process. At the moment, being removed from the public hearing process, the elected officials aren't necessarily even going to be notified when a major development has been approved in your area. What this will do is give an opportunity for the public service to let us know that it's happened, not for any meddling or changing or slowing anything down. But just again, we're often consulted, we're often, opinion leaders in our neighborhoods. We're always asked by the public, what's going on over here. Malls and corridors are focal points in our communities. So there's a lot of public interest as to what's going on. By just adding this trigger, we'll be looped in so that when we're asked by members of the public, by the development community, what's going on, we'll be brought into the loop. The trigger is also that it's prior to the legal execution. There may be an opportunity that the public service or an applicant may have missed something that's a mutually beneficial improvement. That could be made as a suggestion, but not as an order or a slowdown in the process. So that's the motion that I'm moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Eady, motion 6.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know I can sit, but I'm going to stand just because I need to. Madam Speaker, my motion here is to allow the option for the developers of these sites that have been noted that are over 10 acres, where it's 8% for civic space or 4% for sites that are over 2 acres. I would note that sites that are under 2 acres, there's no requirement in terms of civic space. Along many of the corridors, especially along Main Street, you'd be hard-pressed to find more than 2 acres. I don't know about other wards. Probably St. Mary's Road would be very difficult unless you're further down south, Madam Speaker. So it simply provides that the developer would be allowed to pay the 10% in lieu of providing that civic space on the properties. Now, we heard arguments, Madam Speaker, from the applicant in regards to it's only somewhere over 2,000, over 2,000 acres, a tiny percentage of the 177 whatever thousand acres in the city. But you know what? We're not talking about greenfield development here, Madam Speaker, and we know that actually in our community area there are still some precincts left to discuss, and so when we're talking about growing out, these are infill sites, essentially, is what we're talking about here, Madam Speaker. So, I'm not sure about the commitments of the civic space, and we heard some examples of civic space, but those are special circumstances in which downtown renewal, downtown perspective. We're talking about here the general zoning bylaw. We're not talking about the downtown zoning bylaw. And, we also heard from the applicant, Madam Speaker, that while there's studies that say, providing these amenities on developed sites, it enhances the value, it enhances people's wanting to live in the area. Now, to assume that these major developers who own these pieces of land don't understand that, Madam Speaker, I find that very hard to believe. I know that they will have to proceed, and they will on wherever they're building a huge apartment site or whatever. They know that if they want to rent those spaces out at the higher value dollar, that people would be willing to pay, they got to provide something, some kind of amenities on that private property. We've seen that, Madam Speaker, in our community committee when we hear applications there is an understanding. So I don't want people to be left under the impression that it's just going to be straight concrete or whatever. They're going to be doing stuff. Now, I would also note that under all the requirements to move ahead as a right, it talks about building of the private roads, Madam Speaker. It talks, that's separate from the civic amenities. What is also separate is the active transportation trails, or, you know, you could create a private road with as a greenway. Example, we heard from the owners of the Shindigo property, which is adjacent to Polo Park, across the street. And, you know, we heard about that. So active transportation, though, is not included. That was answered the question. That's separate from the civic sites. So provisions, I don't want the public to have the impression that somehow we won't achieve the public good. They're going to have to provide for cycling. And incidentally, on that site, we know that the city is looking at the old railway, establishing an active transportation trail along that. That's somewhere near Empress. I know these properties are very close by, and I'm not sure if the city has purchased the land that we would run that active transportation trail down, but we know that the railways don't need that property anymore. And looking into the future, some of my colleagues, Madam Speaker, are looking at that active transportation trail, and you know, there's enough land there that we could establish a public park. How could you do that? Where would the money come from? Guess what, Madam Speaker? If they decide to pay in lieu, there's money there in that community committee area to help establish a publicly owned, publicly taken care of park that would be attached to an active transportation trail, as an example. So, and I did cite in the past where we have received land dedication reserve. The money received from the Mynarski ward went to enhancing a publicly owned property where people who are living on the Northgate Mall site will be able to go in there and use a track that's kind of nature-based and get their exercise. It's a public amenity that's available just across the street. These kind of things can be established. So allowing, this is an option though. It's not saying that some developers won't develop a civic site. I would point out only 4%, 2 acres to up to 10 acres. You know, that 4%, it's kind of a, you know, it's kind of under what we would consider in greenfield development. It has to be 8%, not 4%. And we pay in lieu, and we know that there are pieces of land, Madam Speaker, in our area that that they have decided they had enough acreage to establish whatever, but because of how things are working, they decided that they're paying the in lieu, but they're developing a property that's going to be, and we have, in this case, once this as a right passes, the public service will be analyzing and looking at the plan approvals. Because they still need a plan approval to make sure that everything's taken care of, Madam Speaker. So it's just that it won't be going through any political process. So that's why I won't be supporting Councillor Chambers' motion. I guess I'll leave it at that. This is an option for them to choose. I don't know what more I could say about it, but we do know that land dedication reserve money is essential. Oh, and I also wanted to mention, the argument that we, the city, don't take care of our parks properly because there's no budget, Madam Speaker, that is no excuse to try to delve this off to the private sector. What we need to do in those terms are, well, we'll deal with it as we go along. Hopefully the mayor is successful about new revenue and some of those things won't be a problem anymore. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Oh, and I will be speaking more to the whole thing afterwards. I should note just at the end, I appreciate the work that's been presented to us, and overall, it looks like a really good plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reedy. Councillor Mays?
Just before we hear Councillor Duncan, I believe. Can we get clarity on on Councillor Eadie's amendment, which I believe I'll support, but I need clarity on a cash payment in the amount of 10% of the appraised value of the site.
Are you asking the public service?
I am asking anyone who can answer the question, up to and including the public service. There they are. Yeah, the 10%.
Can we just finish maybe with the motion? Because I think there'll be questions on
Okay.
several
I mean,
things.
is it before, after? Is it an incremental measure? I mean, the way we get land dedication now is it's an incremental. But I shall.
We'll come right back
fair
to you.
Fair point.
Councillor Duncan? Your opportunity to speak to motion 7.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I had mentioned in the past motion there, this is similar, however, just identifying employment lands designations with permitted uses for business park, specific to Tuxedo Business Park at 1301 Kenniston Boulevard. I did request that a map be included, which is referred to as Appendix A there for those that are not familiar with the area. Also, the land located at Reindeers Drive and Pegwis Street that is referred to as Kildonan Mile allow for similar uses under the regional mixed use centers by amending it to allow for the use of residential under this PDO.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone can speak on any amendment. Councillor Mays, you have a question. Public service, Mr. Mayor.
Question of clarity. I'm not sure what happened here, but I don't know if everyone's maps are the same, but I have the same map on 3 as I have on 7.
Thank you. We'll address that in a moment. Councillor Mays, your question for the public service with respect to motion.
People are reading this stuff. That's impressive. Yeah. So, I don't know if the public service can respond to this. The 10% of appraised value is the understanding, and perhaps this will have to go back to the mover, is the understanding that's 10% of the appraised value at current zoning? Is it 10% of the appraised value once this rezoning exercise has been concluded? Is it the 10% of the difference of the two appraised values?
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Speaker, through the Councillor. The cash in lieu dedication and the definition here is directly referring to the development agreement parameters that were adopted by Council. So when it's cash in lieu dedication consistent with the development procedure parameters might be a better way to word this here so that it is actually consistent with the development agreement parameters.
Fog descends. Can you clarify that? 10%, I mean, it's an attempt to reincorporate land dedication cash in lieu as opposed to the privately owned, publicly accessed parks that we talked about the other night. But sorry, Tim, I should be more familiar. That's on me with the development agreement parameters, but could you educate me as to what you were referencing there?
The development agreement parameters are the parameters by which there's several different sections when we enter into a development agreement through a rezoning process. And the parameters have been worked out over the past few years with the development industry and other stakeholders, and they were adopted by Council, and they just lay out all the different ways we provide conditions with zoning agreements, and everybody was in concurrence when we went through that process. So the 10% cash in lieu is one of those items within the development agreement parameters.
The question was poorly phrased by me. I know what they are, but the 10% is of something. Is it of, one owns a piece of land on St. Mary's Road at Norbury. At present, one could build perhaps a house there. After this, one will be able to build a building perhaps 9 stories, 10 stories, doesn't really matter. There will be no public hearing, there'll be no rezoning process. The land, the value of the land, the appraised value of the land will increase markedly. The 10% is measuring 10% of the current value, the value, I mean, how is this normally calculated when we're doing this now? And I assume that's what Councillor Eadie is trying to incorporate, the same measure we're using as now, 10% of the incremental gain in value?
Reference the specific, sorry, through the chair, we could reference the specific sections of the development agreement parameters. I have them up. The developer in 11.6, if land is not dedicated for park purposes, the developer shall provide cash in lieu payment representing 10% of the planned area value as determined by the city and prior to the release of the subdivision Mylars by the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Mayor, you wanted clarification on the maps. Mr. Clerk, if you could provide that information. Madam Clerk?
Sorry. So the map for its motions 3 and 7, the map attached references the property located on Kenniston Boulevard. There is no map with reference to the Kildonan Mile.
Okay. Thank you. Next is Councillor Rollins.
Thank you. I will want to speak to all the, the whole item, but in this case, similar to Councillor Mays, I'm going to seek clarification from the administration on a few things that I think are important to note, perhaps, and get clarity on my mind, Madam Speaker. Number one, pertaining to Councillor Eadie's motion, number 6 today, the amending motion that the proposed bylaw be amended to provide an applicant may be permitted to provide a cash payment in the amount of 10%. I too, given that this council ushered in the development agreement parameters, while I share the author's desire to create an option, there were 2 points that I consider, and I want the public service to remind me, Madam Speaker, of these 2 points. Number one, they spoke to just briefly the development agreement parameters, specifically the cash in lieu. But number 2 is the analysis that is required, which is, I'd like Mr. Veach to expand on what, if I'm remembering correctly, words on the record that he put at the hearing the other day pertaining to a March timeline. Because, and I'm wondering if you could clarify, there is some analysis needed because in many cases on malls and corridors, cash in lieu may have already been provided and at the 10% mark. So what I would want, Madam Speaker, in theory would be to consider that. And so I was hoping that the public service could add clarity because I think there's complexity here, and I absolutely want this to be an option, but I don't know if this is the instrument or it is the development agreement parameters, or we require this instrument in this bylaw, of which there are 2 sections that it pertains to. And we need to take it away because I wouldn't want to forgo the microforest for the trees, if I could make a bit of a joke, Madam Speaker. And on smaller sites where perhaps the site has already paid in cash in lieu, that there might be a green roof, that there might be some other civic amenity. And so I was hoping that the public service could comment.
Thank you. The response from the public service?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor, thank you for your questions. In terms of the March 2025 discussion, and we feel this with amendments overall and the motions, there's a lot of good ideas in these motions. There's a lot of merit, but on several of them, we would recommend that we take time to review to engage with the stakeholders we engaged with through this whole process. And the 2025 of March is when we were committed to delivering the Fours on Fours project and the public hearing, et cetera. So we would say after March 2025, say in the third, fourth quarter, is when we can take a good look at these, consult with stakeholders, developers, and come back with appropriate recommendations on the wording on some of these.
Thank you. Councillor Rollins?
Madam Speaker, it didn't answer my question. My question was specific to Edie's motion. My question was specific to Edie's motion, specific to analysis that may need to be done, that I accept, with respect to malls and corridor sites that have already been identified in the bylaw that the Public Service has put forward, and that amongst the sites identified, there could have been already contributions. And so I'm concerned about a motion that would indicate that we're going for another 10%. So if they could respond to that issue, I'm sorry, sometimes due to fatigue, my questions are less than clear. But I want them to respond specifically to sites they know that have already perhaps paid cash in lieu to this city. And so a motion like this would represent direction from council, which would be a net new 10%. So that is what I understood you needed to take away and analyze. Part one. Part two was that I wouldn't want to forgo a net new civic amenity as part of that, the implicit understanding that for speed and as of right, we might get some other type. So, some other type of care, whether a road or an amenity.
Okay, thank you.
That's the question I'm asking.
Are you able to speak to that?
My apologies, Councillor. In addition to under the current development agreement parameters, land dedication cannot be acquired if land dedication had been filled within the past 30 years. So you're right, there could be an analysis done of the properties in the malls and corridors PDO to see if there had been land dedication provided in the past 30 years. And that would give us a more fulsome sort of
Thank you.
idea.
Councillor Edie moves that we can work past 12 noon. All in favor? Contrary? Carried. Okay, Councillor Mays?
We're not in our usual sort of order here, but I will say this: I intend to support all of the amendments, disappointing those former friends or those colleagues of mine who said all I ever do is complain about anything. I'm going to support all of these amendments, but regardless of the outcome, I do intend to support the overall original motion from Councillor Gillingham as amended or unamended. Mayor Gillingham. A couple of overarching thoughts on this, and in this format, I guess we can always come back and say something else, but two things. Three things maybe. The malls and corridors were certainly part of the mayor's platform, as we discussed at some length the other night. I respect that. So it is also in our strategic plan. The strategic plan took out the words "as of right," but regardless, the council voted again on that in November of last year. So, yeah, the intent is to do something on malls and corridors. As people have said, it's kind of the low-hanging fruit, although it will have taken us 2 full days of debate, so it'll be interesting to see how long the fourplex week will take. But if this is the low-hanging fruit, I guess 2 days of hearings isn't so bad. So I will be supporting the overall concept of trying to densify along the malls and corridors, but two things need to be emphasized here. It is and the term is deliberately, it is a windfall gain for property owners. People have bought pieces of land that are not currently zoned for certain densities and certain heights. They will now be able to build to certain densities and certain heights without any public hearing. This is not going to be like Northgate, which you presided over, Madam Speaker, where you said, I think quite accurately, I got exactly what the neighborhood needed from the developer. Those days are going to be done after we give third reading to this. So it is a windfall gain. There will be more revenue from the city of Winnipeg. That has been accurately characterized as trickle-down economics because that is what that is. There's going to be a large private profit on this, and the city will likely garner some additional property tax revenue, perhaps even more than what was estimated in the HAF documents. But let us be clear, there are definitely some winners here, and the winners are the people who own shopping malls and who own property along corridors. It will increase housing supply, one would think. That may create some lowering of the cost of housing, although how much affordable housing will ever come of this remains to be seen. So let's be clear, this is a move that will result in property owners, in some cases developers, being very large financial winners. The land dedication part, we can debate further, but that's certainly one tool we have to address community needs. That will no longer be open to us. I'll certainly be referring complaints to the civil service or to the mayor's office because I'll have one less tool in which to try to address local needs as a result. That said, it was something the mayor ran on. Nobody ran on the fourplex idea, nobody at all. Had they done so, it would have been interesting to see what would happen, but we'll come to that debate in March. The other point to make is it's a massive shift of power from us to the civil service. That is inarguable. There will be no further public hearings. Councillor Rowlands last year said when we were debating, there will still be public hearings. And to a measure, that is true. We are having a public hearing today. We will have a public hearing in March on the fourplexes. That's a plural, that's public hearings, but that's it. So this is a very large shift of power from the elected officials to the unelected officials. We've had lots of bitching in here, lots of complaining in here about, oh my God, the municipal board and its unelected people are going to be making decisions. Ironic in that now we are consciously moving to shift the control over these, what were rezonings, to the public service. There will be development agreements. I will have no say in them. You will have no say in them. No one around the table will. It'll be negotiated with the public service. That's what's on the table. Let's be clear about that. So all of these huffing and puffing about the municipal board being unelected, let's remember what's on the table here. It is a large shift in power from elected officials to unelected officials. As I said, the mayor ran on this. He used the term as of right in his platform. Can't debate that, so that's fair enough. But that is exactly what is being proposed here. So will the development agreement require repairing the park, which is what all the neighbors want? How do we know? We don't know, and we'll have no say in it. Will the development agreement require, I think you had an old right-of-way opened or closed or something at Northgate. I remember all very finely grained detail about what was going on in the neighborhood and driveways and all sorts. All of that won't be under our control anymore. So let's be clear about what this is. It is a massive shift of power from elected officials to unelected officials. We won't have a say in the development agreements. We won't have a say in any rezoning hearing. We won't be able to attach conditions that some of us have done over the years. People put aside units for Saint Amand. People put aside units for other purposes. In some of these rezoning matters, that's all done. That's all gone. This is it. This is the hearing. There is some irony in having people come and speak in public in delegation saying, please do this. Then there'll be no further public delegations. I mean, if we characterize literally every single person who's ever complained or been active or come down here in opposition to a rezoning, every one of them was a NIMBY. Shame on them. They're hurting demand. Then why didn't we vote to do the 800 units at LeMay Forest? It's an interesting question. Now, LeMay Forest, as Director Boris quite rightly pointed out, is not on the corridor. That was a bit of hyperbolic flight from me to suggest that, but it was raised by the developer. So yeah, there will still be some rezoning hearings in this place if you're not a fourplex, if you're not on the malls and corridors. We may occasionally get something in here where there's a rezoning, probably not many. But what this is a very large shift in power from the elected to the unelected. I'm prepared to go along with it. Part of the deal here is there's federal money from the Liberal program, which will result in some affordable housing. I think I misstated some of that a year ago. That's on me. But there's a shift in power here, and you may say, well, everyone who ever objects is a NIMBY. Well, not everyone in my ward objects. They realize the reality of the situation. There have been a lot of problems. People in Councillor Lukes' ward had issues with rooming houses. They objected to things. People in other wards have had issues. People in Northgate had issues. They showed the hell up and spoke about it, and we were able to do something about it. So I would hope we all realize that's what's on the table here today. It was a 13-3 vote to proceed with the half. Fine, I was on the losing end of that. I will be voting in favor of the malls and corridor speech, which I always think is probably the low-hanging fruit if we want to densify. But let's keep that in mind as we move forward onto the later stages. Do we really want to hand off power over not just the malls and corridors, but all sorts of potential development mid-block throughout every residential neighborhood, because the pledge was fourplexes in every neighborhood and everywhere in the city where appropriate. So we'll have a good time trying to define what that means. But just keep in mind, what's being proposed here is a massive shift of power. I'm prepared to go along with it today. The mayor did run on this. The mayor won the election. So we'll have an as-of-right scheme, but let's not pretend we're going to come back here and have a bunch more public hearings and people at that mic. This was it. This was their chance to speak. People spoke saying, let's have fewer of these opportunities to have public input. Okay, but let's just remember, that's the exercise here today. It's not an exercise in democracy. It's an exercise in ending people's right to come down and speak in opposition to certain types of development. That's what it is. However, the details of if we want to go further than that on other developments, we will come back to in the months to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eadie. We're going to take a 5-minute recess at this time. There's been 2 requests. We'll come back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm reconvening our special council meeting of November 21st, 2024. Our next speaker is Councillor Santos. Councillor Eadie, I can add you to the speakers list, or was it? Yes, thank you. Councillor Santos.
I have questions of the administration,
Yes.
so I'm looking to you, Madam Chair, how to best approach this. I do have several questions on several different motions.
Go ahead.
So, okay, so I can go right ahead, right into it? Perfect. So with respect to motion number 2, I believe is Councillor Orliko's motion, the affordability housing units being built into the bylaw. Kind of help me walk through that, because you had, I believe it was mentioned that there was no criteria to add affordable units to the PDO. Is that correct?
Currently, right now, in this PDO, there's no affordability criteria within the PDO.
Okay, so then, however, let's just say, for instance, a developer comes in and wants to apply for the HAF funding or TIF funding or CMHC funding, which obviously has criteria to affordable units. Could they still apply while they're doing this application to do malls and corridors?
There is the HAF initiative for the affordability grants. And that's a separate initiative from this PDO.
Okay.
And it's typically projects within the downtown, and then I think some in the shoulder communities of downtown. But it's a separate initiative through HAF. So this would be, the PDO here would be entirely separate and likely separate sites.
Okay.
from-
So a developer would not, if they wanted to do a PDO site or a malls and corridor site, could not apply for Housing Accelerator Fund?
I don't know the exact parameters. The Housing Accelerator Fund affordability project is within the downtown and some of the shoulder communities. Perhaps there may be some overlap, but
And then then to my second question would be the CMHC, because sometimes some developers do apply for CMHC and do require affordability. Could they apply? I guess I could have asked developers, but I'm asking you, like, is there opportunity for them if they were to use CMHC affordable criteria? Could they apply?
yes, they could definitely apply for the different programs and still be eligible for the PDO as well.
Okay, perfect. With respect to motion 3, which I believe is Councillor Duncan's motion, I think it's also in conjunction with motion 7. What I'm noticing here, and maybe Councillor Duncan can chime in as well because this is his motion, I'm going back to the question that I asked earlier that I didn't feel was answered correctly. I have within my community in Point Douglas employment land. I believe I have some, I believe that it can be considered corridors. So help me understand how he was able to find a location, but yet, however, within the Point Douglas, nothing within like the employment land, or Keewatin is another example. Could it be also added as well? Because now I'm thinking that I want to move an amending motion to kind of amend the map. So help me explain how I can support a motion like this, versus within my own community in Point Douglas that has a corridor, I believe, on Kenaston, and also employment land, such as the Inkster Industrial, or Omads Creek, which is another industrial, or the Northwest Business Park, which is another industrial area, or Route 90. I can give you many options.
Yes, through the chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, to the council, through the speaker. The Malls and Corridors project is focused on malls and corridors, and is focused on properties that were zoned commercial, properties that are on our major corridors that are within complete communities. They're already mapped. The major mall sites that are in complete communities are already mapped. That's what the project is focused on. Sites that were zoned park, sites that were zoned manufacturing were not included because they do not allow multifamily in the zoning bylaw. So we've gone with the council motion, malls and corridors, commercial sites, the employment lands, employment sites were not included for that reason.
So then my question then to this one, because it's including a business park, I believe I had also mentioned employment lands. Would housing then be allowed on this particular site?
If this motion was to be passed, it would be yes. But in terms of the public service recommendation, we would say that this is something that should have more study to it and more engagement to start opening up the PDO to employment lands.
Right.
It's something we feel would require a lot more time and study and engagement before we started opening up manufacturing.
Excellent. Moving on, motion number 4, I do have questions. I believe this was Councillor Chambers' motion. Wanting to bring the development permit process to the relevant community committees prior to issuance of the development permit. I guess this would then nullify the whole concept of as of right. Am I correct to assume that?
Yes.
Thank you. The response?
Through Madam Speaker. Yes, that would be our perspective, is the whole significant piece of this project was to enable as-of-right development for quick and facilitate fast housing approvals. So this motion, bringing plan approval back to community committees, would add that additional review and an additional process and time. The form-based bylaw that we're putting forward has strict and rigorous design guidelines in it. There's guidelines on massing of the buildings, there's guidelines on materials and landscaping, streets and frontages. So that would be our impression, is that a motion like this could even impinge on the HAF application and the federal agreement.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to, so motion number 5 kind of somewhat ties into motion number 4. However, it's only, from my understanding, would notify councillors for information only, is kind of how I'm thinking it. But I do have a question on respect to process. My office will get notifications from the planning department when there's things that are going into the public, such as newspapers. My office will also sometimes get emails about permit applications that are coming in. Is there not an opportunity at the same time that we could incorporate that similar process when it comes to services agreement, or is it going to be different? Is the permit notification that my office gets, can it not be incorporated similar to this request? Is my question clear? Sorry.
Thank you. The response, James?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, there is an opportunity for that. We even with the prior pre-application process, councillors would be notified when a pre-application came through. So the public service could definitely put in a process for, we could say, any sites within the malls and corridors, PDO. We could notify the area councillor that an application has been received. We could put it in a standard operating procedure. We do it right now for demolitions. So this might be a sort of a compromise, and we could notify councillors, we could get feedback for information purposes only, and continue to process the applications that way.
But that's more through the standard, so follow up, you had mentioned the standard operations. You would not necessarily need a motion from us to do that, or like, I'm somewhat supportive of this, but if you're already doing that practice, when it comes to other applications coming forward, especially permits, demo permits, pre-applications, this can just be easily added into your standard practice. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say so. We could put this into just our standard operating procedure with the area planners, with the zoning department, as applications came in for the PDO. This is something we could put in place immediately without an amendment.
Okay. Moving on to motion number, thank you, council colleagues, for allowing me to speak. Motion number 6 with respect to Councillor Eadie's cash payment in the amount of 10%. So I'm just going to back up a little bit. Councillor Rollins brought up a pretty good point that I would like some clarity on. Before, when some of these sites had been built already, so these malls and corridors in the past or currently have been built already, during that time when they had done their DAV parameters, would they not have already paid their 10% cash in lieu? That's my question.
Thank you. The response?
Yes, that could be the case, Councillor.
Okay.
Robert has the clause in front of him that explains that, but it's a 30-year, and if it's the same owner, it's even in the past 40 years. If they have paid cash in lieu, it would not be
Right, because most of these sites would have had a development agreement parameter, correct?
Yes.
Was there any point in time before the 40 year or during the 40 years that there was no payment? So when has that, sorry, let me back up a little bit. Was the 10% cash lieu and payment parameter or stipulation, when was that put into the DAV? 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 15 years ago? When did that happen? Because my understanding it was councillor moved that motion in the past to add that to the permit. Do we know when that occurred?
Through the chair, or through the speaker, sorry. The council decision on the updates to the development agreement parameters happened in 2023, May of 2023.
The 10% cash lieu and payment happened in
No,
2023?
on the 30 years, I think that added clarity, if I'm not mistaken, was added when the development agreement parameters were updated.
Okay, added clarity. But that was more to add clarity in how we did the 10%, and it was calculated. Okay, but the 10% cash lieu has always been there in the 30 years, is what I'm going to ask.
Yes, that likely if the parameters state that going back to 40 years, so that would suggest that cash in lieu had been in place beyond 40 years.
Okay, so there is the possibility that these sites have paid already. That would be my That's just, you don't have to answer that. Okay, that's all I have for now. I may have follow-ups after we have further dialogue. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Santos. I just want to clarify about the motions that were circulated. I see two here, motion 8 and motion 9. For the benefit of council, are we withdrawing? Councillor Duncan, which?
Thank you,
or
Madam
Mr.
Speaker.
Clerk, if you can clarify.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, Councillor Duncan has indicated that he wanted to withdraw motions 3 and 7 and replace them with motions 8 and 9 to add the roll number of the property, I believe commonly known as the Kildonan Mile.
Okay. Thank you. So 3 and 7 are being replaced with 8 and 9. Okay, thank you, and you'll have an opportunity to speak to that later.
Thank you.
Or, Mr. Clerk? Okay. So, Councillor Duncan, you concur in that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All in favor? Contrary, carried. Let's go home? No, not quite. Okay, the next speaker is Councillor Wyatt, Councillor Orlico, Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you. I just have some questions of the public service first. The LDR question, in all my experience, I haven't run into an issue, to my knowledge, where LDR had been paid before, but I do recall a scenario where LDR was paid, but then the developer or the property owner never proceeded. They come in with another design, upgrade, changes, and then we do a simple deduction in terms of the net on the LDR that's being paid. The LDR is a simple calculation of 10% based on the increased assessed value. Is that correct?
Thank you. The response?
Madam Speaker, I believe we've been joined by Mr. Gord Chappell from our real estate division.
Oh, good timing.
And Gord is a more subject matter expert on this.
Hello, Gord.
Thank you. Welcome, Gord.
Thanks. Yes, I heard the question. Okay. The calculation of dedication is based on 10% of the planned area value. So historically, the wording used to say something along the lines of incremental increase in the value due to the rezoning and or the value of the creation of the new lots. That was eliminated in the last round of discussions with industry and was changed to just simply say 10% of the planned area value.
So the 10% of the planned area value, so there's not even a netting out of the previous value?
No, subject to the provisions that I think were already noted of dedication isn't payable if it had been done so in the last 30 years or potentially 40 years if ownership hasn't changed.
Right. And if there was a scenario where LDR was paid before based on a previous development and there were changes made or the development didn't go forward and now they're coming forward with it again, they wouldn't pay. But if there were changes, let's say, made to their original plan that would increase the value, then they typically pay the net of the LDR. Is that correct?
Your question is historically?
Well, I'm just saying, you know, in the event that, let's say they have an application, they come forward, they wanted to do a development on their land, they pay the LDR, but they don't proceed for whatever reason, but then they come back again and make changes that raise the value, they would pay the net difference in the LDR.
It would be the current date
that would be
that would be applicable.
Okay.
So if they hadn't paid, they would have to pay the current date. They wouldn't revert back to whenever it was originally approved.
Okay. And then, so it's a fairly straightforward calculation.
Yes, it is now, which was the rationale for the change, that it become complicated.
Okay, very good. And the policy is that right now 80% remains in the community committee, 20% shared to the rest of the community committees, and I think there's a historical building share or something. What's the breakdown on the division of that, Gord?
Yeah, I think the exact wording is 75% goes to the community committee and then 5% then goes to each other community committee. So the end result is that 80% resides with the community committee and 20% goes to the remaining 4.
Right, and there was a Gail Palmerquist Hammerquist Fund at one point, I thought, for how that it tapped into, but I could be wrong.
That's funded through the land operating
Oh,
reserve.
that's the LRR. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Not relating to LDR. One of the biggest challenges that we find right now with regards to applications coming in, and I'd like to know if this is being addressed through your processes that you're planning and pertaining to this as of right, is the amount of time that we don't necessarily see, but we hear about through the industry, I guess you would call it, the amount of time it takes for once somebody files an application to the application getting to the public hearing. Now, the public hearing that we have right now at Community Committee on Matters acts as a kind of a de facto dashboard, whereby, you know, it's a standard where the application's filed, okay, when can it be advertised and when is it going to go forward? There's concerns that the checklist has not exactly been consistent, is what we hear at times in terms of what an applicant must file and required to file. There's concerns about the time that it takes to get to the hearing. There's concerns about once it's dealt with at the hearing, which is only subject to 2 layovers, the amount of time it takes to process everything at the back end, including and up to the legal execution of the development servicing agreement, which is still going to be the case. You're going to have a servicing agreement here that will need to be executed by our lawyers and their lawyer. What assurances can you give this chamber that you're going to adopt standards in terms of the timing and targets that have to be met to ensure the turnaround? Because we're not going to see this anymore. We'll still hear about it from the industry, of course, but we won't really have much say over it because the authority has now been delegated to the public service. What kind of assurances can you give us that there are going to be some strict targeting and measurements put in place to ensure turnaround, both in the front-end application process, to simplify that, to make it more straightforward with checklists that are consistent and not changing?
Thank you, Councillor White. I think we got the question. Thank you. The response?
Councillor, with the recently adopted provincial amendments to the legislation, they've put in timelines that we have to follow. I believe it's like and you're talking about several different timelines. So there's an application that's been submitted. There's a series of requirements of what has to be in the application, submittal requirements. Those are online and they are available for the public and the developers understand what needs to be submitted with the application. So the application is reviewed by the intake staff and then they have to be informed as per our development procedures bylaw if the application is complete or incomplete. They have to be informed in writing to ensure that all the pieces are within the application to allow for a fulsome review. That first process, by the legislated timelines from the province, it was a 20-day window. They had to be informed within 20 days. We in urban planning, design, and zoning, we've reduced that significantly, and now with simple applications that don't require a development application process, which it's just a development permit, we are getting back to people within 2 days, whether their application is complete and incomplete. With the more complex application that requires a development application process, not just a permit, then it's more in the neighborhood of 5 days, plus or minus. So yeah, those timelines have been severely tightened up, and we're meeting those numbers. We do at times with staffing shortages and different reasons affecting the number of people that are handling intake. It fluctuates, but those are the timelines we're looking at intake. And then once intake is complete, then the bigger applications, the development applications, get circulated through all our city departments. And that is often, I believe, an 8-week process to get that done. to get comments back depending on the complexity of the application. So there's a series of different processes that you're referring to. And yes, the back-end process of working with the lawyers and getting the agreements signed, that can take a significant piece of time as well.
Well, this is what we're hearing that I'm hearing and others are hearing that the back end, especially with legal and sometimes involving the Water and Waste Department, those are the two areas that I'm hearing from the Land Development Branch division of the city is taking incredibly long amounts of time. It has nothing to do with your department. And to try to get those matters moving is very frustrating. I would just add that you mentioned Bill 38, but the front end, there's a bit of concern that the minute it is ticked off that, okay, it's now an accepted application, that is when technically the clock starts ticking on the Bill 38 regulation. And there is just some concern, I guess, and I'm just saying this is anecdotal, that there is a sense of delay in terms of that box finally being ticked off. It's now been accepted or checked off, stamped accepted, and now Bill 38 kicks in. And so I don't know are there any independent mechanisms being thought of or put into place to ensure that there is a operating ethos within the department that would try to modify and ensure that the processes are being as efficient as possible here? That's my big concern. And is there any thought, I raised it before, but any thought of kind of an independent office, of the applicant or something that would give a sense and give you ability to look at your systems and modify them and improve them as well. To
Thank
ensure
you, Councillor
efficiency.
Wyatt.
Yeah.
The response?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to Councillor Wyatt. Recently, the Office of the Housing Accelerator Fund Office have just released a request for proposals for an entire process review. So that is just been initiated through some of our funding we got in the HAF application. So that is one piece. We also, urban planning and design, zoning, land development, we meet regularly with the development industry and we talk about these things. And we make adjustments as we go in terms of places where there's pinch points or places where there's hiccups. We also, within the zoning department, our new chief zoning officer has been looking at the processes inside and out, and there is now a position in place where they keep track diligently of all applications, when they come in, where they are, who they've been assigned to, what are their percentages, how are we meeting our deadlines. So there is a lot of checks and balances that are in place, and there's future study, as I mentioned, the RFP coming forward as well, and there's constant communication between the public service and the development industry.
And I also know it's a function of resources as well within the department or lack thereof. One of the frustrating things that, I recall, go back enough time that the area planner is the area planner, and the area planner has the ability based on their own credentials to make decisions on their own. And in the past that was the case. And I don't know if this still continues where I think it's every Thursday where all the planners meet and go through different applications. It literally means a holdup where you get week by week meetings where things can be held up until that meeting comes along. Where in the past, the area planner had the authority, had the knowledge of their area, would make calls on an application and make decisions on their own. There's pros and cons with both methods, but I see the delays of, and maybe the subtle differences that exist in different areas of the city that are being kind of dumbed down in that process. Is that still going on?
Okay, thank you. The response?
Madam Chair, the development application planners and the principal planner, they meet regularly on more complex applications, and that is to ensure that there's consistency in decisions and recommendations, but it doesn't hold up the process. We have our timelines that we are sticking to. Things that hold up the process are the back and forth with applicants, setting up meetings, getting information that has been requested that maybe hasn't been submitted. But no, that doesn't hold up the processing, Councillor.
Thank you.
The administration and councillors during a hearing such as this may speak directly to each other. They don't necessarily have to go through the chair.
We are going through the chair.
You are going through the chair?
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, with that, Councillor Wyatt, we can come back to you. I'd like to go to Councillor Orlikow.
I thought we were going to have lunch, but okay. You guys can wait for lunch. I misspoke before, not that I misspoke, but what I did misspeak when I talking about the motion number 2 is I never asked the administration. Sometimes I feel I'm righteous and always correct, but I do value your opinions. So we've heard from the mayor today that he won't be supporting it. I'd like to know what the administration's opinion of that is. Question 1. Number 2, want to clarify, because I heard recently from the administration that these bylaw changes aren't half bylaw changes. These are permanent changes forever and ever, even when half goes bye-bye, if we even get all the money from half. So that's the second question. So I want to confirm that. So we seem to be thinking it's just a couple of years, but no, this is forever.
Councillor Wyatt,
so those
Councillor
are my two
Orlikow, could you
questions.
restate the first one?
The administration's, thoughts or analysis of increasing or adding some affordable housing, market-based housing into the PDO.
Yes, okay, thank you. The response then?
Madam Speaker, through you to the councillor. Councillor, yes, we reviewed all the motions. We feel this motion for affordable housing for sure has merit. We just felt that prior to just putting it in at this point, we would like to look at it further in terms of speaking with CMHC, speaking with the stakeholders, and you know, the HAF office has an affordable component to the program, and they are giving out grants for affordable housing. And like I said, it's mainly downtown and some of the shoulder neighborhoods. So there is an affordable housing component. It's not within the PDO at this point. So your motion does have merit. However, we would like more time to review it and consult with stakeholders. As well, we don't know how that might affect the HAF approvals and the HAF agreement that we have. And in addition to that, to have it across all development, we would feel that smaller developments, say less than 100 units, less than 300 units, might be impacted pretty severely by this requirement. Whereas perhaps as we research this and come back with it, say after March, we would say, let's have a threshold like developments over 300 units, then you have an affordability component you have to provide, or 100 units, whatever it may be. But we feel the motion has merit, but we just feel it would take more time to review and consult.
Just a follow-up question for that. So, and I was a little, just for clarity for everybody, and I think I have it, so just clarify. If we want to do any further changes to this PDO, such as including 10%, I think the suggestion of including it for 300 units or more is fine by me. It's fine to answer that question. I can make that amendment. But if we wanted to actually add this at a later date, I think you mentioned March, we'd have to open up the whole public hearing again. Is that correct?
Be correct. And you know, as we work through the PDO and as it's in place and we work with the development community, we work with council, with the public, and this PDO is in place and being used, there may be other tweaks that come up that we may recommend. But we have such a full slate going forward through to March 2025. We would suggest that we come back after March 2025.
Okay, thank you. We will now take a recess. Maybe we can reconvene in 1 hour. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to reconvene our public hearing. Councillor Gilroy, your opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess I'm really struggling with this one because, I mean, my record speaks for itself. I'm very supportive of development and really do want to encourage development, but I really think it's important how we develop our city is important. How we go about it and where we should be pushing development is critical. And I think what's most important is the type of housing that we need. And also the how we encourage the development is important. So for me, what I think what we're missing, so I'm going to be listening to everyone speak here today, but I haven't been sold on some issues because what we're missing is when I was first told about this, and I went to one of my first meetings on this, that we were looking at having inclusionary zoning, including in this. So I appreciated the motion that Councillor Orlikow put forward because I was surprised when we didn't have inclusionary zoning in this. These are areas when we're looking at when we look at how we're going to develop. I don't know why we're starting with our malls when we know that our malls are going to go. Those are going to be developed, whether we do this or not. I really honestly believe that Polo Park development, they're itching and they're going to do it whether we do this or not. So that's money we are losing into the city coffers, Madam Speaker. Where I don't see the development is where we're not starting. And that's in the area where we have boarded up and vacant buildings. We have businesses closing. So, Madam Speaker, that's what I'm scared about. I'm also scared that that we're saying, okay, well, we can have affordable housing all in the inner city, but let's not include any of really affordable housing in any other parts of the city. Madam Speaker, and I don't believe that that builds good cities. And that's what inclusionary zoning would do, or that's what even 10%, Madam Speaker, would do. Would make sure that we were providing affordable housing throughout our city. We have these malls that we're developing on. They have an opportunity, Madam Speaker, for us to offer that everywhere in our city, and we're not. We're almost done, Madam Speaker, with our land in the city, where we created these suburban landscapes, and we created an exodus out of our inner city to the suburban areas. And now we're almost done with that land, Madam Speaker. So what are we going to do? Well, let's say malls and corridors. Well, that's great. I believe we need to develop those. But I don't believe we should be paying for the developers to develop on that land. If we want to pay, we need to pay for developers to develop in areas where they don't want to go, Madam Speaker. And so that's what I'm really struggling with. I know that I was there at that meeting with Polo Park when we were talking about being in the airport vicinity and them wanting that to be lifted. They're itching to develop there, Madam Speaker, and we're going to say, do it for free. No cost to you. But Madam Speaker, I can't even get people to come in the inner city. Madam Speaker, I can't even get this council to support little motions like cleaning up inner city parks, Madam Speaker. But yet we're going to give developers money to go and develop these areas that are going to already be developed. Madam Speaker, we have a TIF program, and in our TIF program, we encourage development where it won't be developed. We give them money to support for so many years in order for them to develop there. Because we have no development. So we are seeing an uptake in our downtown, and I think that's what we need. That's exactly what we're seeing. But what I'm nervous about doing this is starting it with the malls. People are going to start developing in those areas and slow down the progress that we're going to be making in our downtown, or the encouragement where in the corridors where we do want them to develop. Now, also, when I was on when I was working for many years, working on affordable housing, we did look at that corridors as an area, Madam Speaker, where we would develop. That was one of the key areas we wanted. But it wasn't corridors along Pembina where we're seeing that development, Madam Speaker. It was corridors like the Sargent, like the Alice, like the Selkirk Avenue. Those were the corridors that we were wanting the city to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to eliminate the barriers for developers to develop there. But now what we're doing is we're eliminating the barriers for developers to develop where we know they're already going to develop, Madam Speaker. So I'm really struggling with this. And in doing that, we give up our right. So now, and I really like that, I'm sad to see that the mayor won't be supporting the affordable housing motion. This should have been dealt with at the very beginning with the public service. We should have an answer to this, and they should have talked about it with developers, they should have talked with the stakeholders, but it wasn't. And that should, I can't even believe that we are looking at a way to increase our housing so it's more affordable, but yet we're not willing to make sure that developers develop affordable. And quite frankly, Madam Speaker, we all in this room know that they're not going to do it unless we put some provisions in place to have them do it or break some of the barriers to allowing them to do it. But instead, we're breaking the barriers to allow them to build housing that's already going to be built. In some of the quarters, we've heard from Councillor Lukes talk about how her stuff is going up. Yeah, because that's where they want to develop. I don't want to support the development along there, Madam Speaker, because I know that that's going to be developed. That's a desirable place for people to develop. We heard that from Shindigo when they were here, Madam Speaker. They were saying those are where they want to develop. That's the desirable places. So why in the world are we reducing the barriers to allow them there? Now, Madam Speaker, I may think malls might be a place to go eventually. I think we might want to look at that eventually if they're sitting there empty for years and years and years. And I think that that's what the idea was here, Madam Speaker. But it shouldn't have been first on the list, Madam Speaker. It shouldn't have been first on the list. We should have started with those corridors that we're really struggling with, Madam Speaker. And so once we free up these barriers in the areas that are way more desirable, that's where the development's going to go. And even on today, Madam Speaker, we're looking at adding industrial area in Tuxedo, Madam Speaker. We're going to add more desirable places for them to develop, Madam Speaker. And we're going to reduce the barrier for them to develop. So it is a struggle for me because time after time I stand here and I try to fight for my neighborhood. I try to fight for the inner city. I try to fight for things not to go elsewhere, and we keep doing them. So, I think we need more housing. I think we need more housing stock. I think we need to do the malls and quarters eventually. I just don't think we should be starting with malls when I know that we know they're going to be developed anyways. We know that. We're reducing the amount of money that it's going to go into our planning property department. At a time where we're having issues with planning property, doling out the permits and the planning documents that we need. We don't have enough planners to plan our city already, Madam Speaker. We have a lack of planning in our department, and that's not their fault. It's because we're not investing in that, Madam Speaker. And at the same time, we're going to say, oh, well, that's okay in areas where we know they're going to develop. So I really feel that we're really missing the ball if we don't add some affordable housing components. I really feel like that. And we're just adding pressure onto the inner city when we say that's where all the affordable housing is going to be. So I'm struggling. So I'm waiting to hear for some thoughtful thoughts that might add to this debate, Madam Speaker. But that's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling very, very frustrated with how this is rolled out. Frustrating that we're not adding affordable housing units, that there's no thought in doing that, and that we're not starting with the areas that really need the investment and barriers broken down for development in those areas. So that's how I'm feeling, Madam Speaker. Looking forward to hearing thoughts, because I'm sure people, maybe I'm missing something, and some other people might have some thoughts on this, but that's how I'm feeling right now. I think we've missed the boat. We missed an opportunity to make sure that we have affordable housing for everybody in everybody's area, in everybody's neck of the woods. And that's what I want to see in a city. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Gilroy. And you'll notice that motion 10 has been circulated by Councillor Orlikow regarding affordable housing. He's wanting to rescind motion 2 on the same topic. Councillor Orlikow, correct? Okay. All in favor of rescinding motion 2 and replacing with motion 10? Contrary? Carried. Okay. With that, the speakers list. Next is Councillor Schreier, then Councillor Eadie, Councillor Lukes, and Councillor Wyatt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I did have a question to the administration first. Yesterday, we heard early on, sorry, not yesterday, 2 days ago, we heard early on in the first leg of this hearing from the administration a very close paraphrase. I don't mind if I'm corrected in terms of, not getting it right, but exactly. But that we can't maintain our city parks. Do we have an explanation from the administration on that statement? It's a very bold statement. It was very simple and emphatic. It was just like that. I'm not mincing words here. I'm not really putting any words in anybody's mouth. Although that, I have to say, to be safe, that's a paraphrase. But there's no misinterpretation. We heard we can't maintain our city parks. Could we get an explanation from the administration on that statement?
Thank you. The response?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, through you to the councillor. I think the statement was more of a general statement in that often we find when we're getting development applications coming forward with proposals of certain parks and green space, we are hearing from Public Works and our other departments that it is challenging to keep up the maintenance on the green space. They're doing the best they can, and overall, they are getting to it. There is a limited ability to mow grass. It's just overall, it is difficult to maintain our parks with the budget that they have at this point. That's what we're hearing when we have applications.
We're talking about the budget's inhibiting us for reducing our work. That's an answer that I can work with and ask questions about, since it was one of the tenets of early explanations of why we're here today. Do we have any report on what it is that's costing us? I'm sure it's not the people that mow the lawn. I can assure you that that's a lower proportion of the city budget than ever before in my lifetime, certainly in my adult lifetime. Mowing the lawn, I mean, because the wage earners are a smaller and smaller part of the city budget. So the lawnmowers receive compared to cost of living, the lawnmowers of the city of Winnipeg make less than ever before in my adult life, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure we could look at the stats from the 1980s that I happen to know about back then by fluke. And do we have another reason besides lawnmowers?
Councillor Schreier, your question is posed.
Question, do we have another? Because I'm just gonna put it out there straight out. It's kind of obvious if you really look at it. The wage of the lawnmowers of the city of Winnipeg receive less in comparison to the cost of living today than they did a generation and over a generation ago as well.
How we're lawn mowers and malls and corridors, I can't connect them directly.
Just a moment, Councillor Eady.
I just want to make a point of order, Madam Speaker. The applicant appeared for several hours talking about problems with the budget as the applicant's rationale for what's in the malls and corridors. I don't want to debate the budget personally, but the floor is open for those kind of questions.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Schreier, you've asked about grass cutting? Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, what other question do you have?
Well,
You want to restate the last question?
no, I'd like a restatement of the answer and explanation. Why offer an explanation that you can't back up, kind of thing? That's what we're here for. Why question the administration on their statements? We were told to give some lenience to the administration. The mayor's questioning the relationship between lawn mowing and what we're here before. So in defense of the administration's explanation, they're saying we're looking at privatizing parks because it's hard for the city to maintain their parks. I've given leniency to the administration for giving that explanation, which I now question. No one questioned them when they said it. No one didn't.
What is your question, Councillor Schreier?
Well, again, I'm back. This is their explanation that they gave to all members of council. The mayor even said he can't connect the dots. It's not my fault.
The question was answered. Do you have a further question?
So they said lawnmower costs, the cost of lawn mowing. All right, Madam Speaker, that's the record. I'm saying that's not correct. I was offering the administration an opportunity to maybe give another explanation, something besides the cost of the labor cost of lawn mowing, which, oh my goodness, of all things that increase the cost of park maintenance, it's not the lawnmowers.
Okay, thank you, Councillor
And that's
Schreier. Thank you. Is there anything further to add from the public service on that question?
Speaker, mowing of the lawns was an example. You know, maintaining all of our parks across the city, there's a huge infrastructure required. There's the equipment, there's the gasoline, there's the resources of people that you spoke to. There's pruning trees, there's planting new trees, there's emptying the trash, there's, you know, it's a giant infrastructure of this maintenance that we're saying when we are getting applications, when we are speaking with our Parks Department, they are telling us it is increasingly more and more difficult to maintain our parks.
I'm not saying is what I've been saying here for 10 years. No one's shown me on paper how I'm wrong. The wage-earning workers of the city of Winnipeg are a smaller and smaller proportion of the city budget. In other words, if you look at them in a sense, they're the ones saving us from greater inflation.
Debate right now, and I would, through you, just respectfully request that my colleague really focus on malls and corridors.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Schreier, any further questions of the public service? Questions of clarification?
I've got some things to say, I mean, it's time, but I can wait for other people to have other questions before I speak.
Thank you. Councillor Eady?
Is it not Councillor Lukes before me? I'll go.
No, it is not.
I'll go. Madam Speaker, through to you, I don't really wish to debate the administration or the applicant, but I would make a note, it's not my question, but I would make a note that what the public service, or the applicant and public services is doing is they're telling us we should have privatized parks. So I have a problem with that. But my question, Madam Speaker, we've heard a lot about my motion and questioning about the development agreement, whatever, a bylaw where if they've already paid in lieu, and what they do is they pay 10% in lieu of providing land for civic purposes. That is what that is in that bylaw. Now, Madam Speaker, what we're seeing in this proposal, and I'd like the administration to explain why my motion shouldn't be considered, in that there are properties indicated here that have paid for land, paid 10% instead of providing land for civic purposes. But in here, we're forcing them as a right. It's asking them to do 4%, for example, or 8%, where they've already paid in lieu of land that they shouldn't have to pay for over 30 years. We're providing a right. So I'd like the administration to please explain to me why it's okay to go after a property that's already paid in lieu for a 4% or 8%.
Thank you. Public Service?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker. Councillor, we're not going after properties. If they have already paid their cash in lieu and they come forward under this PDO, they will not be required to pay again. They would be required to provide amenity space for their development. But no, if the development agreement parameters would still be in place. It's an optional PDO.
This as a right, once there's a right, there's an expectation of 4% civic land use. Whether it's privately owned or not, they're being forced into creating a public space which is contrary to if they've already paid in lieu of 10%. So please explain to me why, when we move to as a right, we shouldn't allow them the option. It's their option. Either they provide us the 8%, which they have to maintain, or they pay us in lieu. What's the matter with that?
Madam
Thank
Speaker.
you. Public Service?
Through you. Councillor, this private open space component in the PDO is the trade-off that they are getting as of right development. There's other trade-offs within this PDO, but the private open space is required for 10 acres and up because it's as of right development. They're not going through the extended process of rezoning, public hearings, etc. In terms of your motion, the Public Service is supportive of your motion. We feel it's a good trade-off, and it's good to provide this optionality. So on the record, in terms of the Public Service, we're supportive of your motion for this choice to either pay cash in lieu or provide the public open space.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Lukes.
Yes, this is a question of the Public Service. I really want to clarify and understand, and I appreciate that Councillor Orlikow has, I guess, modified and amended his motion, his amendment. So I guess my concern is, and I just want to clarify this, my concern is if we make some of these changes that we won't be eligible for the half funding. So when it comes to this, like this new motion about 10% of the dwellings for PDOs over 300 units. Like, in your professional opinion, what I heard earlier was you would prefer if this wasn't in this zoning hearing, that it wasn't accepted, that you would look at it after March, and if we wanted to make adjustments, we could then have another public hearing on that particular item and do that. Is that what I'm hearing? Like, are you concerned that if we do this, it will have an impact on whether we receive the half funding or not? I heard your...
I have a point of order on that. It's a fair question, except if you're going to make reference, and we heard Mr. Mahe make reference the other night to the signed half agreement signed in December of last year after November Council. We had references to it today in reference to one of the amendments, perhaps Councillor Chambers is. This might be in breach of the half agreement. We don't have the half agreement. I can't find it on Demas. The clerk said it's not on Demas. If you want to bring in new information, sure, but are we reposting then? I mean, in March, I want the half agreement as part of that public record that's in front of us. It's a fair question from Councillor Lukes in that you're asserting this is going to breach the half agreement.
Okay,
Aren't you? Is a fair question, except we don't have the half agreement, so I can't tell if I think it breaches it or breaches the Constitution or the Magna Carta. I don't know.
Okay, thank you,
but we should
Councillor Mays.
have it.
Was this question asked previously in the hearing?
No, it's
Mr.
a
Clerk?
completely fair question.
Yeah.
It's just we don't have the signed half agreement.
And I guess I'm hearing that the public service isn't 100% clear, and this is what I want to clarify. Are you 100% clear if this is going to impact it or not? And I heard that you weren't 100% clear if it was going to impact it or not, so you would prefer that you would do more investigation and we not put it in now, and that we hear what your results are after March. Is that what I'm hearing?
Thank you. The response?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor. We are unclear whether or not this motion and requiring the affordable housing across the malls and corridors PDO would affect the agreement. We do not know one way or another.
The half agreement, it was not filed. It's not on Demas. The
That's
clerks
right.
tell me.
And no one is
So
circulating that because it would be new information.
then how can we have discussion about X is being breached? We think it breaches the agreement you can't see. That is not proper procedure under a public hearing.
To clarify, we don't know. We're not saying yes, we're not saying no, Councillor. Through Madam Speaker, to clarify, we don't know if it will affect. We've been dealing with CMHC from day one on filing this application for the half funding. We've shown them our initiatives. Initiative number 1 for malls and corridors did not mention us also requiring affordable housing. So it was never discussed with CMHC. We have an affordable housing initiative that is being run through the half office, which I spoke to earlier, which half money is being given out to developers to provide affordable housing, mostly within the downtown, some of our shoulder neighborhoods. The applications for those were overwhelming. All the money has been given out, and they're hoping to get additional money through additional tranches.
On the safe side, what I'm hearing you say is, to be on the safe side, let's not include it, and let's, if we, once you find out down the road, if we want to add this in, then we just open up the PDO and do it, we add it in.
Well, exactly, and then with the consultation, with speaking with the CMHC, speaking with stakeholders, nonprofits, affordable housing providers, we can come forward with a
Right.
well-crafted
Sure.
proposal.
Okay, I just wanted to understand that clearly.
Okay, thank you. Next is Councillor Wyatt.
Madam Speaker, I just want to say a few words. I have more questions of the administration, but I just want to say a few words on motion number 4, moved by Councillor Chambers. And just to put it in context of where I think why this is a good motion, why members of council have expressed or maybe not thinking of voting for it, might want to reconsider. And I know there's some thoughts that it somehow presupposes the as of right. I don't agree with that. Because community committees have been very flexible in terms of dealing with these matters. We do not hesitate to call special meetings to deal with plan approvals. We do it all the time. We're very effective that way to do it. But I will just cite the fact and the concern that I have. It's been stated over and over and over again in this meeting about the lack of resources the planning department have, and I think it's real. The other thing that's not only a lack of resources in the planning department, there's also been a real challenge in the planning department when it comes to succession planning from one generation to the next. We lose some amazing staff. The training doesn't necessarily go into bringing somebody up to replace that amazing staff in terms of passing on the wisdom and knowledge. And that is, again, as was cited before, not the fault of the public service, but fault of funding of councils today and in the past. And we have lost sometimes the ability to have and ensure that sometimes some of us who have institutional wisdom and knowledge around this chamber are able to bring to the table when it comes to plan approvals. And I'll just give you a couple examples that have happened recently, and one that was a little while back. In Councillor Schreier's ward, 1131 Narran Avenue was a new building that was approved by this council, 6 stories tall. It came forward for plan approval. The fencing, there was going to be a private dog run. The fencing was problematic. Why? Because it would have created safety issues. They were going to enclose it all in an area where there's some issues with regards to, how can we say, some of the things happening out into the streets today of Winnipeg. We made sure it was open with a chain link fence that could be seen into and through, because it was going to be between the building with a wall on one side and the back side wall or the east wall of the Chateau Lanes Bowling Center. The parking lot in the back was not maneuverable by emergency vehicles. They actually had dead-ended both parking lanes. That emergency vehicle went down, they wouldn't have been able to turn around. We addressed that in the hearing. We improved the walkability by better sidewalks. We did all this, by the way, within 2 weeks. We had one community committee meeting, and our next one was 2 weeks away. We didn't have to call a special meeting, though we were prepared to do so. And we actually got it addressed. And believe it or not, we did all this working with the applicant. The applicant, the builder, was extremely happy. The other thing that we did with aging of our population, we ensured that the entranceway was visible, built beautifully. We always push for beautiful buildings in our community. And that's the part that really I want to drive at and stress why this is still important to do. Another set of eyes that I would encourage council to consider. We had an application come forward around the same time for Canadian Tire. Canadian Tire is doing a massive garden center on the front of their property. They're also doing an expansion. Believe it or not, they came forward with the building right on Regent Avenue at the corner of Rougeau and Regent, if you know where that is, in the heart of our community, one of the highest vehicular cross sections of road of any regional street in the city, which putting up a garage that looked like it was in somebody's backyard in the arm of Springfield. And frankly, we couldn't believe it. And nothing that wrong with the arm of Springfield. There's nothing wrong with a garage like that, maybe in Transcona, but not on the front. On a major regional street, we needed to see that this was upgraded in terms of its siding, in terms of its look. Terrible access for pedestrians. No walkway in and out of the garden center for pedestrians, for accessibility for people with disabilities. None of that was taken into consideration, and yet it was brought to our file was brought to the community committee, asking for us to sign off on this. Finally, I'll give another example, and so I want to stress, we're constantly saying to build beautiful in our community. Another example was a number of councils ago when Walmart was doing an expansion, and I pushed back. I looked and saw Walmarts across North America with beautiful landscaping, not a sea of parking lot that we're used to here, but beautiful landscaping with trees and walkways. And I pushed Walmart back for more trees. And I'll never forget, I got a call from the then CAO. He might have been the acting CAO. I won't mention the name. This is some time ago. And said, let's meet Walmart. And it was kind of ironic. We met in the Palm Room of the Fork Area Hotel to talk about trees. And I can tell you the pressure from Walmart was massive. They did not want to spend, and I wasn't like asking for hundreds of trees. I said, I was pushing for another 18 or 12 trees at the time. They appealed it to the standing committee, and they got their way, okay? But it was the power of a big corporate, so much so that I was walking into the standing committee meeting to hear their appeal, to speak to it, when the then acting CEO or CAO came up to me and it sounded like he was working for Walmart. That has the power of the multinational corporation reaching into the chambers of this building. And so I strongly recommend that there are some very simple things here that we can do to ensure that we build beautiful in our community. And this is an extra set of eyes. It doesn't eliminate the as of right in any way. The as of right is tied to their ability to build. The plan approval is a post-approval that's required. They've already received their approvals. We cannot stop, as the administration knows. And they can verify this for you if you want, we cannot stop a development because of the plan approval. They've already received their approvals. This is a post piece of administrative work that we do in terms of both administration and members of council to approve. It in no way, shape, or form affects the as of right approval because the approval is already done. Plan approval is thereafter. We even have accommodated plan approvals when we've had our break. We have we get our prorogue period where we will accommodate it, where a councillor will sign off on a plan approval in writing that it will be adopted immediately at the first community meeting following the prorogue. And we have done that in good faith with the planning department more than once. I strongly think this is something that should be considered. I thank Councillor Chambers for bringing this forward. I really am concerned that the rush to development, is we're going to see a lot of buildings going up that we're going to look at later and say, geez, why did we let that go up? Look at that. How did that get approved? With that look, or that entranceway, or that, where's the walkway? Where's the bike parking? We, on the 1131 Narran Avenue, we had 20 parking stalls for about 100 units. We ensured over that community committee that every unit got a biking stall by the time it was done. These are things that can be addressed that only the elected representative sometimes has the passion to ensure it happens. Because why? We have the accountability to the residents. We're the ones who are going to answer for that building going up. Just keep that in mind as well, councillors. No matter what happens here, no matter what is approved, well, no, I don't have a question. I'm speaking about this. But no matter what happens here, Madam Speaker, we're the ones who are going to be accountable in the sense that the administration might have the power to sign off or transfer, but we're the ones that people are going to come to and say, why the heck did you approve that? And we didn't even approve it.
Thank you.
Or any say. Thank you.
Next is Councillor Rollins.
Madam Speaker, it's my intention to speak to the main motions and the amendments that I'm supportive of in hopes to, get us going on the main items and actually trajectory towards the vote. I'm supportive of the main motions of the department. As a matter of fact, it represents a lot of the work that I feel really engaged in as chair of property and development and housing. I'm supportive of Amendment 1, and to quote Roberta Bondar, who just recently wrote a gorgeous book called Space for Birds. The diversity of birds are declining as our planet tests their fragility and resilience, and half of all bird species are in decline in the prairies. The grassland birds are in decline, so time is of the essence. Thank you to Councillor Lukes for putting that forward. I will not be supporting Councillor Chambers' option, as I believe it runs contrary to the point of the zoning bylaw changes being introduced today. I will not be supporting the matter pertaining to service agreements because we have, as Councillor Santos indicated, enhanced circulations to council, and I think that that is important information for sure, and I see no reason why we can't continue to enhance circulations to council as of right development proceeds. I am very supportive of Councillor Eadie's motion, and I thank him for bringing it forward. And while I question the timing, I understand completely Councillor Duncan's motion. He, as a member of P&D, has had his hand up, as you heard from Councillor Santos too, and has done and presented maps here, and so I'll be supportive of those, though I do really want to underline the strong caution from the public service and hear them that they wanted to have us set the pace on some of these. I'm supportive of Councillor Ollerco's changed motion here too. But I want to address something, Madam Speaker, because all of our eggs aren't in one basket here today. It feels really substantial that we are here today. Many, many months ago, I talked about the 3 bites of an apple that the Standing Policy Committee on Property and Development were going to take. And I think it's useful to kind of run through that, because this 3rd bite of an apple I had, I absolutely knew it was going to be a whopper. It would be a significant bite. So I think it's really important to answer also, Madam Speaker, the call that I heard from the Daniel McIntyre ward and some substantive comments on the record on my sister in the struggle, Madam Speaker, Councillor Gilroy, who once, if I can paraphrase, said to me in 2018 when I got here, "Patience, grasshopper, we don't talk about housing." And Madam Speaker, here we are. And I'm experiencing my best life in advance of my 50th birthday, fully talking about housing, fully trying to address a housing crisis, and with a whole of council targeted on the same thing, thanks to the leadership of Mayor Gillingham and a renewed effort from all of us around the council. So we started with 3 bites of this zoning apple, from the smallest and easiest step that some folks laughed at us about a bit, especially if I can tease a delegation that hopefully is not listening anymore, but Lanny McGuinness, the obsolete tech of the satellite dish, making sure that we introduce amendments that remove the need for development permits for 25 specific types of smaller project, the biggest little thing, to quote the Director of Property and Development. And these include landscaping and small accessory structures and hot tubs and pools and patios and retaining walls. But we had more to do. So we moved on from the smaller scale developments. And then we looked at facilitating housing development in mature communities. We looked at detached secondary suites as a right. We looked at eliminating parking requirements, and we've been eliminating parking requirements. Why? Because we, we are concerned about expense, construction inflation, to my colleague, Councillor Schreier, who routinely reminds this council about that and its impact. So the changes represented a proactive effort to align Winnipeg's zoning framework with the city's growth needs and housing challenges, and reducing those regulatory barriers. And then here we are in this third bite of the apple, this next phase on malls and corridors, PDOs at pre-approved sites. A tremendous amount of work that the department engaged in, needed help from a rock star group of consultants that came in, and together we all did that gallery walk to look at these pre-approved sites, the opt-in on corridors, and I want from the bottom of my heart to thank the department, because they have been with this council every step of the way, each bite of that apple, Madam Speaker. And they, after these marathon hearings, Madam Speaker, are committed to hanging in there till 2027. We're not done, they say. They probably want to say we're done as of today, because we're all so tired. We've been up, it feels like 3 straight days. And Councillor Brawadi and I doing a bit of business with home builders last night while we stayed up even later, right? Working as we did till about midnight for the betterment of the city. Madam Speaker, the changes emphasize these mixed-use developments. They emphasize increased density in strategic areas, particularly those near transit hubs. And if I may, in closing, Madam Speaker, turn to the implicit call that I believe the Housing Committee of Council, Councillors Orlikow, Councillor Gilroy, are bringing to the fore as the forefront of the concerns. And as chair of that committee, and of Property and Development, and of Human Rights, it's important to answer that call and to reassure this council that we don't begin and end with housing and our concerns around affordability with this vote alone. We're doing a few things. We're doing a series of things. This absolutely touches on our policy environment. The role of the City of Winnipeg and other municipalities in housing policy, you of course would turn to your policy environment, and this is surely that. But we also have housing policy. We have our Winnipeg, the City of Winnipeg's official development plan, and we have 6 broad directions on housing to that end, where we are supporting diverse housing options in each neighborhood, where we are collaborating with other levels of government and other partners to renew and regenerate Winnipeg's housing stock, where we're establishing partnerships with the private, not-for-profit, and government sectors to provide affordable housing throughout the city, with a particular focus on locations near a variety of transportation options. And Madam Speaker, I think that's a key third of the 6 broad categories, so I'm going to emphasize that and then come back to that point in a minute. Provide leadership in encouraging and enforcing property-related housing standards that create and promote safe living conditions, tenants, communities as a whole. Support the integration of specialty housing within residential neighborhoods with a particular focus on locations near a variety of transportation options, and encourage residential development downtown. Those are our 6 broad categories. And to that end, Madam Speaker, what else do we have? Well, we've created housing policy and programs, whether it's the housing, the HRIR, which we've enhanced, with Indigenous, that pays for Indigenous housing, that pays for housing in HI dead zone, we have the tax increment financing, we have home repair, land sales, Winnipeg Housing Rehab, that is incredible partner to both us, the provincial government, and has thousands of RGI units. We've strengthened our not-for-profit strategies for housing, creating a team who is meeting with partners, providing projects in the city, and leaning into much more, which is likely why Richard Mahe is not here today, because he's got those meetings, as does Elise Finnegan. So, today is about housing for sure. It's about those 6 broad strategies for sure, in particular locations near a variety of transportation options, in particular focusing on locations near a variety of transportation options. But it's not, we're not a one-trick pony. We're not just doing one thing, Madam Speaker. We're doing many things, but boy, this is really important. We're delegating. We're delegating so that we can do more and different. We've got a housing needs assessment. We did it with the University of Winnipeg. It provided and asked us to look at tools for sure, that we're committed to continuously looking at for a variety of reasons, including housing. There are many good reasons to look at this and to say yes to this suite. And I want to thank all members of council who put forward motions, regardless of whether or not they have my support today. This 3rd bite of the apple, and the next one is difficult, Madam Speaker, but I'm hoping that we've had significant time and attention with the support of our public service, that we're able to call the vote, get her done, and move on to our council meeting. Because this is good work. We can bring it back. In fact, that's the business plan. The department says we're keeping this zoning bylaw open essentially till 2027 for the full rewrite. We took 3 bites of the apple. With a successful vote today, Madam Speaker, I'm going to say I'm really proud of us. It has been incredible heavy lifting by this council. It is one of our strategic projects. We have been consistently leaning in and really working with each other on things that are not easy. And finally, I will be supporting Councillor Orlikow and Councillor Eadie's motion. I'd like to thank them very much for putting them forward. And Madam Speaker, I'm hoping that, before too long, we can call the question. I do think we're ready. I do think we're ready to take the next step. And then really, I'll be very grateful to this council that together we took 3 bites of an apple and did generational change to the zoning bylaw with a vision to getting the full rewrite done by 2027.
Thank you, Councillor Rollins. We do have some more names on the speakers list. Councillor Mays, followed by Councillor Schreier, then Councillor Gilroy and Councillor Wyatt.
I think actually it's the same, it was the point I was making on if we're going to talk about, if we're going to have answers saying your amendment probably can't be approved because it may well breach the HAF agreement, we have to have the document that is allegedly being breached. So too late for today, at least, unless we want to bring in new information, but if people are going to make reference, for March, we have to have that legal signed document in front of us as part of the public record so people can make reference to it. Additionally, if we're going to have a public hearing that is real and not a sham, we will need to conduct ourselves as we have today, rather than having people say, oh, we'd love to do your thing, but the federal minister probably doesn't like your thing, or he texted me or telegrammed me yesterday saying he doesn't, or the CMHC doesn't like your thing. Prove it, frankly. I mean, it's a quasi-judicial hearing. We're not under a veto from some higher level. If we are, I don't know why we do this and tell the public to come on down. We get to make decisions. If the federal government then later says, no, we don't like the Chambers Amendment, we don't think it should be an 8-story height limit on Nairn, so we're not going to give you money unless you change that. Okay, that's new information, you repost and you have the debate. But what you don't do is conduct a hearing with a ghost in the machine off stage that's saying, well, we'd love to do your thing, but we think that's actually going to veto it. You have a legitimate, real public hearing with public input. If the funder later says you got to make some changes, well, then we reconvene and repost and have a new public hearing. But what we don't do is say, I think I'd love to do your thing, but I think it breaches the agreement we didn't put in front of you. We can't have that in March.
Thank you. Councillor Orlikow?
Just a point of, I feel kind of weird because I feel like we'll get back to the applications that we don't ever see going into the government. They come back with these massive mandates that we never knew were happening. Mayor's office is aware of them when he does sign off on them. I found that out. So I actually was denied the application to see the half. When I tried to see the half application, it was denied to me, but somebody out there on the planet did a FIPA application. I'm not saying who. And I have the application right here. I don't believe I can send, but I don't believe I can provide that under, is that correct? I just want to check. So I can't provide. You all should have it. Sorry you don't. We'll try to fix it up in a later date, but I have it.
Thank you, Councillor Orlikow. Next is Councillor Schreier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Did I hear this right? I don't want to get confused or confuse anybody, mislead anybody. Councillor Orlikow just made the point that we're voting on a document that we're not allowed to see or show, or the public may not discuss? Yeah, okay. Madam Speaker, I'm not the only one. Really good discussion over this 18 hours, 19 hours of debate in this special council meeting of hearing body of council. Really kind of up the ante kind of thing in terms of serious discussion on serious issues. There's a lot on the line here in different ways. Having said that, we all individually, as members of separate community committees and appeal bodies, have experience in these things, and this is a combined hearing, the likes of which we've never seen. Talking about something that we've never experienced before, and together. And
Question, Councillor Schreier?
question? No, this is my topic. This is my speech. No more questions. I'm allowed to speak now.
Yes.
Yeah. And fills me with hope, despite I don't know the result of this vote yet, but in terms of some of the comments and concerns made by some of our fellow councillors, including in this case, Orlikow, Mays. But if there is going to be a council idol of the day, goes to Cindy Gilroy. Just said it. I couldn't have said it any better, but I'm going to try anyway, because she just really laid her concerns out in a way that was simpler than maybe, as simple as I'd like to say it. That's not always that easy to do, but she did it. And it was clear to me what she was trying to say. It's clear to me what she said. She laid out her concerns, and they were extremely responsible, extremely reasonable. She talked about the relationship between taxpayers' money and deregulation. And when I say deregulation, I mean taking out the public process out of hearings or the involvement of the Democratic elected councillors and the results of this. And she said some things that, well, okay, here's my bias. I'd been saying them as well. She made the point, amongst other good points made today by others, she made the point that she believed, and I believe it too, that some of this was going to happen anyway in terms of development in the malls and corridors. We didn't need to do all this to do that. Because that's where that's low-hanging fruit in a way. That's like the next level in terms of where we would go. So what did we do in order to attain something that some of us think was inevitable anyway? What was the purpose? So we take away greater public participation through the community's lack of involvement and the councillors' lack of involvement. And then we, and I mean through taxpayers' money. I never said through the city of Winnipeg. Through the taxpayers, including Winnipeggers, all Canadians, including Winnipeggers no less than anybody else. So, I mean us. Using federal funding to subsidize that process, which I believe she's saying, I certainly am, is unnecessary. That's why use the money for something that's going to happen anyway. It's already encouraged by virtue of the fact that there are already corridors and malls. That's the easy place to develop. She made the point, which I've made before, we need to put in incentives to have urban renewal, to put the money where we need to have in order to have a holistic way of developing and maintaining the state of our city, including our core area downtown, of course. That's what we need to do, including some other areas, like some areas like I represent and Ross Eady. That's where we need to put our incentives. What kind of special incentives have we implemented to put the money, the resources, and the encouragement to maintain the quality and the state of these neighborhoods of our city in order to maintain the state of our city in general? And have we done that? No. We're putting it into where people were going to go anyway, just by, directing some of our resources there, rather than putting a full half program and the deregulation. And I mean, it's sort of unfortunate that we've heard here today that some members of council cannot connect the dots between what the administration had said, between the relationship between putting tax money into subsidizing privatization of parks or private parks because of the inability of our own city to maintain our existing parks. Wow. And then the reasoning we're given is because the cost of the wage earners. And I'm going to say this again, show me how I'm wrong. It's the wage earners that have offset, reversed, as a matter of fact, the imbalance. It's not saying it's a good thing, but just statistically speaking, if it wasn't for the wage earners, we'd have a greater rate of inflation. They actually went in reverse. They actually make a lower wage in proportion to the cost of living than they did 30, 40 years ago. So the last people we can say that are causing the inability of us to maintain our parks are the people that mow the lawns. Of course, there are other factors. Gasoline, show me how the cost of gasoline has gone up at the same rate as other rates of inflation of capital. Show me how it is the case. You can't, because it's not the case. So we're using the examples of the very things that are actually part of, despite what we think of increasing gas prices, that shows you what the kind of cost increases we have, including in construction, maintaining our parks, whatever. It's certainly not labor, and actually, because if you take labor out, it's actually a higher rate of inflation. If you take the cost of gasoline out, it's even higher, because those are the lowest ones. So we're trying to have a discussion here in terms of why we're doing this, and we can't even get it straight. I'm not blaming anybody. I've been asking for 10 years for a report on construction inflation. We've never had one. The record's all over the place in terms of why we never needed one in the first place. We got misled.
Correction, I believe we have actually had a report related to construction inflation, but if I enter that discussion, I will be getting into debate. So if we could just stick to the malls and corridors, thank you.
Oh, Madam
Thank you,
Speaker, we have got a report on construction inflation to which we can't even be on the same page in terms of what's caused the inflation. We've heard by His Worship in this chamber that he said that the reason for inflation.
Councillor Schreier, the topic before us.
Speaker, I'll stick to my, I guess, what other councillors have said, because they weren't ruled out of order, so how could I be? So I'll stick to that. We've talked about how we need to do this in order to facilitate having more housing. Now, we already know that you put more tax money into something to subsidize it, we're going to get more housing. You already know that if you deregulate, streamline by taking out public participation, democratic participation, yeah, you'll get more housing kind of thing. We already know that if you put it in areas where sort of, as Councillor Gilroy says, would predict it was going to happen anyway, yeah, we get more houses. You put all three together, and that's where you put all your eggs and resources into these baskets. I know this, into these PDOs. It's like, well, of course. But where's the long-range strategy for this? And that's because, why do I say how's that related? Because you only have so much money, as a matter of fact. There is only so much tax money. Well, even the administration would relate to that, because they're the ones that said we can't afford to maintain our parks. So I want to mention a few things. We've never had, until up to this point right now, before this vote, we've never had less political involvement, if you will, and we've never had more deregulation in order to offer a density since the inception of Unicity, if not before. And here's what I mean. Until the 1990s, the community committees actually had, for the most part, last word on development hearings in their ward, in their communities. That changed in the late 90s, and so then it can be bypassed by going through the Standing Committee or EPC. So there's a really good example about how things have changed already. And then we've had our Winnipeg, Plan Winnipeg, My Winnipeg, these to encourage densities already and to make it easier for development and density. I've been in favor of that. I've done so much for density and to facilitate these things. And yet we're told that's still not enough, even though we're putting, well, across this country, billions of dollars into it, over 100 million here. So, when's not enough? And also, by the way, Madam Speaker, really important to the point, this is really to the point, we've never actually had, we're not on the same page yet in terms of how long these bylaws are obliged to stay, because there is no format for that. Madam Speaker, we change the bylaws here all the time. That's our job, to change the bylaws, to change the laws, to change the rules. That's our job, to change them. When we bring in a rule, we're actually changing something else every single time. Every single time, especially when it comes to planning and development bylaws. When you bring in a bylaw, you're literally changing another one. So we've never been on the same page. I wouldn't mind hearing it here, something that we can all acknowledge, because it's like some vague thing. This is forever. What does forever mean? It seems like that to us, and that's why you can't blame councillors for looking at this with trepidation, because we don't know the timeline. We're accountable to all taxpayers about this, Madam Speaker, and I can't tell my next door neighbor how long these rules are going to be in place or how long they're obliged to be until we change them. Okay, there's a good answer. Actually, Madam Speaker, thank you to Councillor Duncan for speaking out of line, but thank goodness he's allowed to. I hope we don't strike his words from until we change them. Well, it's good, because you know what? That's the reality of our Constitution, of the federal government, the provincial government, and thus the charter of the City of Winnipeg. And there's nothing we need to do today until we put a timeline on it that says we can't change them. And people better get to know that. Everybody, the developers, the citizens, everybody, and us in the administration. Because there will be conflict one day down the line, and people are going to say, well, no, we were told this, we were told that. Well, let's have it on the record here. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor
Councillor
Duncan.
Schreier.
I'm not finished yet, Madam Speaker. I'm just thanking Councillor Duncan. I wish to thank you soon enough, Madam Speaker. But there's a few more things to discuss. But you know what? I have had my point here. I am in essence in support of the efforts of the amendments by my fellow councilors. I'm in essence in favor of them all. Oh, that's a pun, them all. No, I mean them all. In this case, I certainly support, I talked and conferring with Councillor Wyatt in terms of Councillor Duncan's motion regarding the Kildonan Mile there along Reinders. I say Reinders, they say Renders, but anyway, Reinders, he's in favor of it as well. It's just right out, starts at the border of my ward, goes through Kildonan Place there. That certainly makes sense for more than has been mentioned, so it's rather insightful in a way. Perhaps Councillor Wyatt or Councillor Duncan could comment on that. I'm going to leave that so I won't speak as long. But, Madam Speaker, there's a lot at stake here. And we just say this is about a change in PDO. No, we're subsidizing this as well. So we're putting tax money, our tax money as Canadian citizens in Winnipeg, towards this. And meanwhile, I don't think it's a very, it's not the most strategic way of attaining the goals that we need to do in this city, Madam Speaker. And, Madam Speaker, I got to tell you something. In general here, we're not explaining, in fact, I heard yesterday, we are not here to explain why we're doing this. We're not here to explain. We're here to offset the costs because we say this is to make housing more affordable. It's not really creating affordable housing. It's to sort of take the edge off kind of thing, Madam Speaker, without explaining how. Well, that's kind of sad, Madam Speaker. It's kind of scary. That's not the way you actually deal and project and plan for the future. Again, I'll say it again. You can't fix a problem you don't understand and can't explain. When we do understand it and show our understanding and explaining it, then we're on the road to solving a problem. Madam Speaker, we heard the other day, this is not about solving the problem of construction inflation, and yet we are here to offset the costs of rising housing prices.
Okay.
So
Thank
there you go, Madam
Thank
Speaker.
you, Councillor Schreier.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Gilroy, followed by Councillor Wyatt.
Yes, this is a question, because it was very helpful hearing Councillor Mays's talk about what we can be permitted to do and later do something if we need to. On Councillor Orliko's motion, I know there was an issue back when we built, when the True North Square was being built, and my community was really upset about not getting 10% for affordable, and we were able to, working with Mr. Chipman, we were able to get that money, and it went into our housing, or into our housing fund, which then we were able to reinvest that money into housing. So is there anything preventing us from even doing something like that where, a percentage goes in lieu of that development, and at least it goes into our housing fund, where we can then turn around and reinvest that money into affordable housing?
Thank you. Public Service.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Public Service would say to look at something like that, a program like that, it would take time, and it wouldn't be something that would be put forward by a motion. At this point, I would recommend, Public Service would recommend, we need to consult, we need to work with the different stakeholders, we need to figure out the details of something like that, but it could potentially happen.
So start collecting that money and then develop a program,
Potentially.
potentially.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Wyatt, followed by Councillor Eady.
Just thank you, Madam Speaker. A number of questions. The LDR, in the past, we have waived it, and certain criteria has been followed. Namely, we have waived it for seniors housing, we have waived it for affordable housing, and we have waived it in scenarios where we had a major environmental on the site to assist with environmental cleanup. Is there any thought given, in light of Councillor Orliko's motion, that be a scenario as well?
Public Service.
In other words, that it would be, you have either you give cash in lieu 10% LDR, or you give LDR the equivalent 10% in terms of affordable housing, as has been done in the past. It kind of ties in actually to two motions I'm referring to here now.
Madam Speaker, I would like to defer to Gord Chappell
And
from
if
our
you need
real
to take that
estate,
under advisement, that's fine too. Oh, here's Gord again.
likely under advisement.
He's like God, he appears out of nowhere. Yes. Always there.
Only one letter away. I'll just add that the charter requires dedication. You can't waive dedication. It's just a question of whether it's collected or not. That's maybe beside the point in relation to what you're saying, but just throwing that out there.
Right.
But in terms of what you're saying, as of right now, money is collected through cash in lieu and placed in the land dedication reserve, and then how that money is spent is then dictated by council policy. So, yeah, I think as James said, I think there's maybe a bit more to review there, but there could be options to look at.
Well, the only reason I'm asking, Gord, is because I'm going from memory. I recall we had a not-for-profit, it had to be a not-for-profit seniors affordable housing project. I remember Mark Bate telling me specifically it can be done. It was on Wood Lake in Transcona, so we actually earmarked the funds from that we either back to or we waived it. I can't remember the process. And then the second one was the Park City Commons, which was a joint venture with the city where they had a massive environmental from an old City Winnipeg Public Works site, and we earmarked the funds back. So I'm saying that in light of these precedences, is there not a scenario where you could say, okay, we don't want to put the private park, we don't want, we're going to pay the LDR, however, we're going to elect, or the city could say we're going to elect to put that into affordable housing. Now that's just throwing something out in light of that.
Thank you. Gord, your response?
Yeah, I think it's just a question that we would need to take back. I wouldn't write that off necessarily. I think there's some things we need to consider in terms of what policies, bylaws, and legislation exists before we can make that comment. I don't think that was something that was necessarily considered coming into this hearing, so it's a new thing to take away.
I'm supportive of Councilor Orliko's motion, but I guess where I'm coming from this is I'm going to say this, I support concerns raised by the mayor that the market has only so much to bear and that ultimately you're passing it on to the cost of their development when they put these types of costs on. So you get another 10% for affordable housing, you got another 10% or private park. Well, that's actually now you're saying, okay, well, that's actually going to drive up the rent of everybody who's going to be in there. But anyway, it's another story. My other question I have, and this is for all the staff, thank you, Gord, was in the 1970s and 80s, council went on a big approval spree. Council approved Garden City Shopping Mall, Unicity Shopping Mall, Kelowna Place Shopping Mall, St. Vital Shopping Mall, Polo Park Shopping Mall, all in the suburbs. Lo and behold, downtown Winnipeg by the late 80s, early 90s starts to die. And everybody's running around downtown Winnipeg dying. We approved all these suburban shopping malls. Surprise, surprise. What's to say that this cannot happen again? That basically we're doing the same thing again. And to revitalize it, we did center plan under Susan Thompson. It came back with it was under Thompson. We came back with a recommendation to create Center Venture. Council seeded $10 million cash into Center Venture, dedicated all the land in the downtown to get Center Venture going. That spun the whole thing going in the downtown. Are we going to do the same thing again? Are we looking at policy tools? Are we getting prepared for that scenario in light of the fact we're going to be driving? And correct me if I'm wrong. They could not only build housing here, but they could do commercial still. They could also put up office towers in these mixed use, because that's mixed use, right? And so you're going to see office towers going up in suburbs, in where shopping malls are. And that typically where we've said, no, that's going downtown. Are we going to come up with a poll and say, so all office towers still in the downtown? Or what thoughts have been gone into the planning department to address this? I think it's a real concern that Councilor Gilroy started raising, and I really think it needs to be addressed based on our history of the city of Winnipeg.
Thank you.
Any
Public
thoughts?
Service?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, to the councillor. In terms of policy for downtown, our Winnipeg Complete Communities has always been downtown first. Our Winnipeg Complete Communities 2.0 is still downtown first. There's a very detailed, comprehensive policies for downtown development. We have many programs for downtown development. We have the TIF programs. We have this new Housing Accelerator Fund, one of the initiatives for downtown. As well, Downtown Center Plan 2050 is just being adopted, or just has been adopted. That is more policy encouraging downtown investment, beautification of downtown, residential downtown. So we do have significant policies in place and recently adopted, and some that were in place previously. In terms of malls and corridors and commercial and office place in malls and corridors. The C4 and C3 zone always allowed office within malls and corridors. So it's not like we're introducing that as a new use today. This is focused on introducing multifamily in malls and corridors. So I don't believe you're going to see a big difference in offices being developed along these malls and corridors. There will be mixed use, and as more people move into the malls and corridors, there will be more requirement for services. But we don't feel that we're going to take away anything from downtown. We're looking at continue the downtown push to keep it thriving and growing and a place for people to live, work, and play.
I thank you for your answer. I think it's going to become more acute as time goes on. That's my concern. Long-term affordable housing, we heard the applicant come forward at the very beginning of her presentation. She spoke about affordability and affordable housing. She spoke about specifically deep affordability, talking about the lower income levels and the challenge out there to afford a rental place even, never mind ownership of a home. In light of the fact that the HAF is here today and gone tomorrow, it's a temporary program, not a permanent program, which no federal program typically is, yet the bylaws we're passing today are permanent. What sort of long-term affordable housing program did the department push the applicant back on with their application in light of the fact that that was a cornerstone of her presentation to us?
Thank you. The response?
Madam Speaker, the director and the applicant was referring to, we anticipate with the adoption of this PDO, yes, there will be extended lands opened up for multifamily. In terms of the discussion on affordability, the addition of this new units throughout the market, likely the affordability per dwelling unit will go down. That was the statement from the director and the applicant. In terms of long-term affordability, deep affordability, we have a small housing group within PPD. We also have several different programs that encourage and give grants to affordable housing, working with nonprofits. And again, the part of the HAF initiatives are working with affordable housing and nonprofits.
I appreciate the answer. I want to be productively skeptical because the last 20 years or last 17 years or so have shown the opposite. We've opened up more housing. The rents have increased. Part of it has been a function of the province of Manitoba eliminating all rent controls on 15-year new construction, as well as any kind of rehab you do to an older building. They get massive waves, owners get massive waves in terms of being able to adjust rents, have driven up rents, driven people out of apartments. Anyway, my next question is servicing agreements. Impartiality. I'm really concerned about the need for the department to be impartial. You have the applicant being the director, you're doing your job, Public Works as well, water and waste. Throughout these corridors, for example, there's a need for land assembly. We have the on-street rapid transit corridors. We're going to need widened right-of-ways for that. We're going to need widened right-of-ways for AT that we didn't have before. My experience being with Plessis Road when the city of Winnipeg got into the joint venture with Genstar and then went to application, and all of a sudden the twinning of Plessis dropped off the map. I was really questioned back then the impartiality of the public service. What kind of impartiality and any kind of mechanisms are you going to consider for independent auditing or what have you to ensure that approvals that are coming forward look after the best interests of the city of Winnipeg as possible?
Values, which I think is a matter of decorum.
No, I'm not
This
questioning
question
the
about
public service of
impartiality
today.
is about the public service's transparency, accountability, professional, ethical values, Madame Service. There must be a different question in there when they are
I'd like
at
to
its
hear the
essence.
question again, Councillor Rollins. I thought it
All
was
right.
fair. Can you restate
So
that?
in the this is prior to now, this is the examples I gave is before this public service was sitting here. But I can tell you right now that an example was with the application for the power center on Regent Avenue, before I was a city councilor even. There was major right-of-ways that the public service pushed back on. They wanted widening of Regent Avenue, they wanted service roads, all of that fell off. That was a council decision to remove those things off and not take that land. However, the public service recommended it be done. I want to make sure the impartiality is still there, but I also know that sometimes that needs another set of eyes. Are there any mechanisms being considered by the public service to ensure that it is, and I know your department is stretched with assets, And I cite the example I cited on Tuesday, which was we put in place, in terms of real estate transactions, the auditor, as you know, attaches a report to all sales and leases the city does now to ensure that there's a lens of, that protects the interests of the city. And is that something that could be considered? Thank you.
Thank you. The response?
Yeah, Madam Speaker, in terms of the servicing agreements, we provided the appendix which showed the draft template. It is based on the development agreement parameters and past servicing agreements we've had with developments. In terms of the public service and responsibilities, we circulate these through all our different engineering departments, water and waste, transit, public works. The engineers look at these closely. We are always treat everybody the same, on the same page across the board. There is within the charter, Councillor, Madam Speaker, Section 189, I believe, and it does give applicants the right to appeal a development permit. And as the servicing agreement would be part of the development permit, when we do have a servicing agreement, the charter would allow a process.
Okay. Thank you. One last question for now, Madam Speaker. What we're doing here is the idea is to jumpstart and make projects happen. Is there any concept to, and I know you may not have the resources today, but I was happy to hear about the funding requests that you made earlier through the HAF, but is there any concept to the idea of, and I guess the lack of terminology would be like your own internal independent planning facilitation teams? In other words, pulling together planners who would go basically approach the property owners and say, here, we got a concept for your property. What do you think about it? Do you want to get going on it? And I guess I use the example as my understanding was we worked, the previous councils worked very much with some of the First Nations in Winnipeg Treaty 1 lands, their project there. And we did we did have city resources and planning, water and waste working with them to assist them in their plans. Is there any thought of doing that to bring these projects on faster and sooner so we can achieve the $250 million in extra revenues rather than later? Because sometimes it's just a question of doing the planning on the property to get the project going. And if we did that and we met them halfway on that, maybe there's a way to bring sometimes you got to spend a bit of money to make a bit of money, no different in government. So any thoughts on that?
Thank you. The response?
Yeah, Madam Speaker, through you. Excellent points, Councillor. We do have the Land Enhancement Office now in the Housing Accelerator Fund. They're looking at city lands and working with different developers to bring forward applications and fast-track applications to get some of these lands into the hands of developers to provide some of this multifamily. This is not within the Malls and Corridors project necessarily. These are other lands that we're marketing with developers to get housing put on them. We are also, we have a concierge service now in the Housing Accelerator Fund that works with nonprofits and helps nonprofits navigate through the system to get housing on board and permits issued. We also have, within zoning and permits, we've put a couple, even though we lack resources down in zoning and permits in terms of people power, we put a couple people on the case of just Housing Accelerator Fund applications to manage those as they come in and process them as their only job description right now. So in a way, your ideas are good thoughts, and we've already been incorporating many of those.
I just have one quick last one.
Thank you. Final question.
Final
then we have
question is,
another speaker.
a lot of the corridors that I noticed here that have been targeted, historically, lots of length, but not a lot of width, depth, if you like. Has there been any thought given in terms of the future with regards to whether it be through a development agency of some sort or a division in the department, even looking at the E-word expropriation, to be able to create depth in terms of these properties so they can actually do some real multiple family combined with mixed use office / commercial, because you look up and down McPhillips, you look up even down Narran Avenue, certain areas, Pembina, the depth is not there in the rear and the back of these properties. If you can get that depth, then all of a sudden you've got some significant mobile family that can be occurring there and make those areas viable. Any thoughts on that?
Thank you. The response?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, to the councillor. We have talked about the idea of if there's adjacent parcels behind the parcels on the corridor, and that idea of consolidation.
Right.
If the owner is able to purchase a parcel behind them, and then they could consolidate, and then it would all be part of the corridor. We haven't talked about how the city could step in
Okay.
and do some of this, but it's food for thought.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eady, and then Councillor Schreier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to rise just because we've been sitting a long time, and I'm rising, Madam Speaker. I'm here to filibuster and do a 2-hour speech now. Just joking. Oh, I'm joking. Madam Speaker, this will be, unless somebody gets me going, but this will be my last discussion. I'm going to speak to all of it. Basically, my conclusion, because I think, well, let me start off, Madam Speaker. I agreed to move into this process because I voted for the original motion that we did when we were moving forward with an application for the Housing Acceleration Fund. And so all of this stuff that we're discussing today does derive from that motion. And Madam Speaker, I also want to say that I'm not lamenting how long it's taken, because when I moved the motion, well, originally it was Councillor Orliko's idea, but kind of backed off. But I saw the value in having all of council undertake a hearing, because it offers up an opportunity for all 16 of us to propose motions, discuss, debate, amongst ourselves. We shouldn't really be debating with the public service, although in a way we are because of the applicant. But Madam Speaker, I just wish the first round of zoning changes would have had it, because a lot of the things I've heard in this hearing of with all of council, I think we would have heard in the first round, and then maybe this round might have went a little faster. But I did vote. Once that was in there, I did then agree with the mayor and voted for it as it was amended. And I thank the mayor for participating now in these long hearings, but it does empower each of the 16 of us a little more than would have been. So now overall, the malls and corridors aspect. Now, the whole purpose of this is to expedite housing getting out to the market, whether it's affordable or not. The concept behind the malls and corridors are there's all this potential infill out there, and to make it happen faster, whether it's affordable or not, doesn't matter, as of right, we'll expedite the process. I am confident in that, Madam Speaker. And in speaking to that, it seems to me under the right, you still have to get your building permit. I believe there is still a plan approval by the director involved, although it doesn't come to the public meeting. You know, is kind of concerning in that, you know, the public, the only chance they really had to vent about what might be built eventually under the malls and corridors is actually this hearing right now, Madam Speaker. Because there won't be any hearings, there won't be any input. And for that reason, though, I know that I will get calls as things move along. And Councillor Brawadi's reasonable request that we get that information sent to us rather than us having to go and dig around and find whatever, which has been what's happened in the past with things that got passed that didn't go to a public meeting where we were involved, Madam Speaker. So that really makes sense. We should really know what's happened so that when we do get the calls, and I'd prefer that the department, if there's some controversial that I agree with Councillor Mays, they should take the calls. But Madam Speaker, we do need to serve our public, and so getting that information is so critical. Now, I know that on my corridors, there have already been applications for half money. Not in the downtown area, outside of the downtown on Main Street. And Madam Speaker, this here doesn't prevent applying for that money to build affordable housing. Now, when I make that statement though as well, I would like to point out though, Madam Speaker, Councillor Orliko's motion, and he's amended it to say 300 or up. What I will point out to anybody who's going to build under this rate, that they accepted and they build under this rate, Madam Speaker, there's nothing preventing them from applying to CMHC or HAF or anybody who's providing money to make sure that there's affordable housing. So putting this on where there's 300 units or more and asking for 10%, there's nothing stopping them from going to CMHC. As a matter of fact, CMHC would probably, deal with some experts. Some of this land is huge, and there's a lot of expert owners. And that could facilitate speedier, affordable housing too, not, rent geared to income, which is what Councillor Gilroy and I need to see in our areas, and rent geared to income outside, like far into the suburbs. I would point out though, Madam Speaker, just for all of us, the Housing Accelerator Fund did approve out in Transcona, maybe in the older part, but still some people consider Transcona to be the suburbs, especially if you don't live in Transcona, if I may, Councillor Wyatt. So there are efforts out there to spread it around, and I think it's important that we don't create ghettos and that only affordable housing, and it's not to say that people who can't afford $1,200, $1,400 worth of rent for a 3-bedroom for their family. I'm not dissing that. I'm just saying a lot of the applications, it is happening in the inner city, and we should be spreading out across the whole city some of this stuff, Madam Speaker. So in the overall picture, I don't see why you need to develop a plan for Councillor Orliko's motion, in that you have expert developers who are going to be moving forward. If they decide on a rate, they can actually go and apply to CMHC, and they could probably make it happen really fast. I don't know how much money CMHC has available for affordable housing, but, Madam Speaker, it could go a lot faster with experts working on it. So I will be supporting that. As I said, the only motion I won't be supporting, although I really, really do understand Councillor Chambers' motion, but the public service is going to have to take responsibility for the plan, whatever they approve, and they send us the information, but the public service is going to have to take responsibility, Madam Speaker. And they will be held to account if it goes back. They will. I will publicly go after them, Madam Speaker, if there's failure. One of the things that I was a little disappointed about, I don't believe it's in the whole thing, about building the private roads, that, the people who will be the public living in, say, the Polo Park area or whatever, I see no reference to meeting the city's universal design standards for the exterior environment. It's not, these are not going to be public buildings that they're building. They're going to be rentals or whatever, but the universal design standards were put in place to ensure that streets, active transportation trails, any kind of space where people are allowed to walk, and nobody's going to deny if I'm walking down a private road out on Shindigo's property in the future. Nobody, how could they say, oh, you can't use that? That's a civic piece of land that will be there. So I understand, and I'm going to conclude just on the 8%, 4%, and all that. This is an option, right? And we've heard that. My motion with the LDR actually will help facilitate and maybe help developers of big pieces of land move quicker. Because that's what the expectation is, Madam Speaker. Expectation is, once we pass these zoning bylaw changes, this will expedite and move forward more housing on the market. Now, I don't want to debate market demand, so on and so forth, because I think, and we won't find out until over time, that with this malls and quarters, what effect will that have on the city's plans in downtown? We don't know what effect that's going to have. We're going to find out, but there's no proof, there's no fact yet, because it hasn't happened, Madam Speaker. So I'll leave people with that, and I've stated how I'm going to be voting, and hopefully we can get to the vote soon. I think we've clarified as much information as we can, and it has been rigorous over the hours. And again, Madam Speaker, thanks to everybody involved, including our clerks. This is not an easy process. It's lengthy, the public service, the applicant. It's all hard work, but you know what? In the end, hopefully we end up with something that works for all Winnipeggers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eady. Mr. Mayor, there's one more speaker, Councillor Schreier, and then I'll have the mayor close. Councillor
It's just
Schreier.
on one point.
Councillor Schreier.
It seemed to me that there was a concern that Councillor Wyatt raised concerns over judging the actions of the administration, and concerns. I'm concerned that there may be concerns that he's judging the integrity of the administration, and there might be something wrong with that. I'm just going to say that is the essence of democracy, absolutely the reason for democracy. And I don't know a better reason for democracy. Because if you don't question on a regular basis your governing body, those who govern on a daily basis, then you don't have democracy by definition. I think it's kind of the definition of it. People, this month we celebrated the fact that people died for that. And so just bear that in mind. We shouldn't be taking this personally. We all get judged. We have an integrity commissioner. In fact, our integrity commissioner is questioning. Yes, it did, because Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, the idea of why we need public participation and the participation of the elected representatives in public hearings over development is being questioned, Madam Speaker. That's where we're at. And then when we question question that, it seems to me, Madam Speaker, we were questioning the integrity of the administration. Let us remind the basics of why we're here, Madam Speaker, is to question the operations of our administration. That's what we do. And if we forget that, what are we talking about?
Thank you, Councillor Schreier. You tied it to what you just heard a few minutes ago.
We're just hiring a chief construction officer. Why? Why are we doing that? Just bear that in mind. Just bear that in mind, Madam Speaker. This is not trivial.
Councillor Schreier, any questions of the administration or any other comments you want to make about the motions before us? Okay.
We all do that. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let's continue doing that.
Thank you. Councillor Wyatt.
Yes, I just want to put some words on the record, Madam Speaker. I don't have any other questions of the public service. I want to thank the public service for responding to my questions and the diligence that they showed. I appreciate it very much. And I also want to mention I really appreciate, Madam Speaker, all the words of all my colleagues here today. I really, as Councillor Eady said, I think the idea of this, Calgary does this all the time, by the way. Their public hearings are the entire council. But I just want to say that the level of commitment, the level of time that members of council have taken, and sincerity and knowledge and things that I've learned from comments from others and words from others has been very appreciative. And I really think the depth of the discussion has been excellent. I want to thank all members of council. I think it's been a very good exercise, and thank the mayor for allowing this hearing to take place in the first place. I would just like to say a few things that I just want to flag as some issues that I think should be there for us to address. Number one, there's not been a lot of discussion in the Q&A, but I think it was touched on the previous day, and that's the assessments. There has been I think I got a sense from the applicant that there has been an appraisal done of the impact on potential impact on assessments and assessed values. that the highest and best use being that of the assessment department standard. The potential here that will, of course, drive the properties to development or towards development. There's no doubt about it if they're already getting taxed on that higher value. My concern is that the impact it could have on area businesses that are already on those properties, especially small businesses that lease or rent. And I guess that's something that I think has to be looked at and watched. If we are going to hear about it, we will hear about it when the new assessments come out. And I'm sure if there's a hue and cry, we will be having to do something. But that would be, we may want to have kind of something written with our legal department, with the province, just in case that there might have to be a change to the City of Winnipeg Charter or Assessment Act, whichever the case may be. The downtown, I wanted to say that I am concerned just because of my own history or knowledge of the city, amateur historian, if you like, going back to the 1970s and 80s when we did all these approvals of all these suburban shopping malls, and then all of a sudden the downtown just completely went completely downhill. And we turned it around, and we spent a lot of money and a lot of time. Now, it's been cited that we are using the TIF program. Yes, we're doing that. We max out our TIFs constantly, especially on our heritage buildings, upwards of 25, 30 years. We haven't been doing a lot in terms of the province and getting them back to the table in terms of their TIF. Maybe that's an option. We could re-empower Center Venture again. We haven't done that for some time, and maybe that's an option. And re-energize Center Venture into the agency that was created to be. And maybe part of the scenario here would be to say, okay, we have to be prepared, as was stated by the director, that look, this is going to generate new revenues coming out for your property, from property taxes into the operating budget. You as a council, she basically said in so many words, you as a council have discipline to have to go put it into existing parks and playgrounds and neighborhoods. Don't expect the LDR to always be there. Well, maybe we also have to have the same discipline to say, well, maybe a percentage of that new tax revenue has to be invested back into the downtown to ensure, as was stated by Mr. Veach, that we do have downtown as a priority, downtown first. SPAP, the Strategic Priorities Action Plan of this council, made that a priority. And my concern is that in the long run, in the next 10 years, we're going to see the same scenario happen again, where we see malls and commercial and residential being driven up into these areas because we've now made it easier for them to develop on these lands. And I just want to state that I really hope that the department, both not only water and waste I'm not as concerned about, but more public works and planning and transit, that there be a mechanism in place of some sort of way to facilitate, to ensure that our interests on these corridors are protected as a city, even though we are kind of partially at the table here as well. It's not a joint venture. These will be still private developers. However, the pressure on us in terms of the HAF is great. I know that. That may lessen come the next federal election, but nonetheless, I think the housing pressures will be there nonetheless. And I want to just say that I like all the resolutions. I like Councillor Lukes' resolution coming forward. I think it's a fantastic idea. Councillor Orlikow is very supportive of it. Councillor Duncan's two motions. I want to thank Councillor Duncan for working with me with regards to the reindeers. This matter will actually, Kildonan Place is actually in direct competition with Kildonan Mile. Kildonan Mile is in direct competition with Kildonan Place. And it would have given one side a somewhat competitive advantage over the other. This will actually facilitate development in that area, and I think that's a positive thing for both parties. We had, as a community committee, previously replaced a height restriction on the back of that Kildonan Mile towards the residents. This will actually eliminate that height restriction. Those lots on the south side of Elmy are 300 feet deep, so I am comfortable with that. I'm also comfortable with the 45-degree angle setback that has been explained by the staff, and therefore in supportive of that. I want to thank Councillor Chambers for his motion. I've spoken to that, why it's a safeguard to build beautiful, why this is not in any way affect the as of right. This is plan approval has always been post the approvals of anything. In other words, you are approved. There is no issue there. This is just simply making sure that it's done beautifully and that it's in keeping with both accessibility for bike paths and landscaping and just ensuring that the buildings that go up in our communities, that go up and down McPhillips Avenue, from Councillor Sharma's work, go up and down Pembina, affecting Councillor Luke's or Councillor Rowland's or other areas, are built beautiful. That we don't have something going up saying, what the heck was that? And who could put the elevation on that side of the building? And, or in the, you know, some of these key communities up and down these areas, Portage Avenue, which could go through a massive transformation in Councillor Dobson's ward. Could all of a sudden, you're going to be seeing new buildings going up on Portage Avenue. Let's ensure that they're beautiful. Let's ensure there's proper sidewalks. Let's ensure there's proper enclosures around garbage enclosures. Fencing is done right. Sometimes it's the area councillor who steps in who ensures that's done correctly, and we've accommodated that in community committee. If you want to change it, to make it not as community committee, you want to make it P&D. If there's a concern that community committees are not going to do what you want them to do, make it P&D. I'm fine with that. But as long as there's a political lens that we're losing on that one, I think it's absolutely crucial. But I'm supportive of Councillor Chambers' motion because of that. Councillor Bawadi, supportive of his motion. Thank you for working with you on that. And you know, I think that's just for information. We get a phone call from a constituent. What's going on? What's happening? Well, I don't know what's happening. You know, well, you're the councillor. You're elected. Don't you know what's going on in your own city? And in this case, we are delegating authority to the public service. And so in many ways, we will not know what project is going on a building going up, and then we'll actually be able to see it happening. I think that's just a courtesy, and I think the motion makes perfect sense. Finally, I just want to touch on one of the things I touched on, and I know the department is really taxed when it comes to resources. And I know, and I've seen the per capita numbers when it comes to the amount of planners we have per capita in the city of Winnipeg, for example, versus the city of Calgary or the city of Vancouver or the city of Edmonton. And I know we are, in that regard, very much understaffed. Planning is an area, and the Department of Property Development area where cuts have been made over the years, thinking that it will not be the same as a cut as frontline services. I don't want to mention anything about grass mowing or anything like that, but you know what I mean. And so that is really the essence of the problem here, that we need to speed up the process when it comes to applications coming in, but also when it comes to the issues we're having both in our legal department and our water and waste department, of getting applications out the back door once they're approved. Water and waste, I've always said, I don't understand it, but every other department, when it goes through the ACG committee, the administrative coordinating group, every other department weighs in and says, we need this address, we need this address, and water and waste weighs in and says, well, no, subject to you hiring an engineer, we will comment on it after the fact. Well, my argument has been, council is supreme. Council has made a decision on the rezoning, Madam Speaker. How can water and waste come back later on and say, we exercise a right to override the council approval? In a sense, that's what's been happening. It's been going on for some time. And my concern is that water and waste has to get to the table, be part of the challenge that we're facing, a part of the approval up at the front end versus coming back later and saying, sorry, we don't have capacity in the pipe. And that's going to be a real issue here coming up on all of these areas, is whether or not there's capacity in the pipe. And we're already hearing it now. I have a small business person who's trying to put up a car wash on Regent Avenue. They can't get it through. They can't pull their building permit because they don't have capacity. They're not sure if they have capacity in the pipe. It's held up a massive, a small but large small business that would be an amenity for our city. So I really hope that that's addressed, as well as the resources, so we can speed up the front end and the back end in terms of not only in terms of malls and corridors, but in terms of all of the applications that are still coming into the city, and to address that issue. At one time, we did have a floating permit staff, for example, Madam Speaker, that we would bring on. We made all those positions permanent under Bowman in one budget, and yet we're still having challenges in our permits office issuing permits on a timely manner. That has to be addressed. And that's a function of the operating budget. I agree with the applicant/director. Again, I just want to sum up by thanking this public service for all of their work. I'm not a fan of these parking requirements being, I think it's the latest fad. I think we're going to get rid of all this parking and then we're going to be bringing it back. People are going to be driving electric vehicles in the future, folks, and cars are not going to disappear overnight, and it's still a sign of relative prosperity. And then finally, I would just like to say, Madam Speaker, I want to thank all the staff for their work on this. I really hope that the $250 million in new taxes is real. I hope it comes in sooner rather than later, because we definitely need it as a city. But keep in mind that as we densify, so too will be the demand for all the other services that Winnipegers expect. Recreational facilities, rapid transit, more buses. We may be collecting more revenue coming in, but the demands in terms of the services that they're going to expect to want or receive as a citizen of a major metropolitan city is going to be on the table. And if we don't rise to those challenges, we're going to have some real serious issues as a city, especially when it comes to congestion, especially when it comes to rec facilities that are not meeting today's standards, and so on and so forth. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Mays and then Mayor Gillingham.
Thanks. Three concluding comments, all starting with S. The mayor did run on malls and corridors, subject to setbacks, so we will have to come back at some point, I think, and take a look at how well the setbacks are working. We had a very detailed explanation from Mr. Kostick, very good answer provided about those. So that might work if you're separated by St. Anne's Road or St. Mary's from the mall or corridor, but we've got malls and corridors defined. The malls in my ward include some, well, they're not the great big St. Vital Centre. They're much smaller strip malls. They go back to back with residential housing, some of it single story. I've seen those agreements from when those went in, and the lighting in the back and provisions about the thrusting of light into the neighboring yards, that kind of thing. So we'll see what comes of it, but we may need to talk some more about the setbacks at some point. Councillor White is right. All of these numbers may get confused by the sewer capacity. We had instances, one that he worked on as a consultant on Moore Avenue, where you're approved for 6 units, but then Water and Waste says 3, but then Appeal says 4, but Water and Waste says 3. How does that count in the half application? How, what, is it all building permits? Well, okay then, but I mean, that's going to be hard to, there are going to be winners and losers out of this, and we'll see what real world limitations actually are on that. And also Councillor Gilroy, who spoke very well, makes a good point, as Councillor Eadie's points as well, about more investment. And I mean, I think the idea around the image people have of the malls are, St. Vital, approved in the 70s, Unicity, Garden City, all these malls from the 70s. I remember my sister in the late 70s going up to work at the then new St. Vital Centre. So, but also in here, Sage Creek, northwest corner of Sage Creek Boulevard, Bird and Glass, a 14-acre commercial property. It's partially vacant. I mean, that's a deliberately designed community with some residential. There's a town center that's meant to be commercial, but here we are saying, well, maybe you'll want to do residential there instead. So, I mean, if the idea, some of these outlying communities are much denser than communities. Councillor Lucas has made this point quite eloquently, that her ward's denser in many ways than River Heights or other areas. So Sage Creek's actually a fairly dense community, but let's just try and balance off what Councillor Gilroy's been saying, which is she would welcome more investment in her ward with, are we really fighting sprawl if we're incentivizing more residential development in Sage Creek? I don't know that we are. So it'll be a balancing act, and I'm still prepared to vote for the amendments and the main motion, but some good concerns raised by Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you, Mayor Gillingham, and then we'll vote on the motions.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Speaker. A really good discussion, good debate here, a dialogue on all of this, so thank you to everybody. So just to reiterate then, just on my closing comments, we now have, Madam Speaker, can we just check this? We have then amending motions, 1 second here, 1, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. Correct? Okay.
Yes,
All right.
that's correct.
We now have amending motions 1, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10.
That's correct.
And just to clarify, members of council, so motion number 9 is actually for item 2.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have 3 items on the agenda.
Just, I'll make my concluding comments on this in a moment, but just, Madam Speaker, to clarify then, I think what we have before us then is I have made a motion, and the motion was the public service, recommendation of the public, that the recommendation of the Winnipeg Public Service be concurred in, and now will be concurred in as amended through motions 1, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and then we'll vote on them clause by clause.
We'll vote on the
No.
motion separately.
And I know what the clerk's going to say, right? We'll vote on the motion separately. It would be 1, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10.
We'll vote on the, I'll
But
call the vote. I'll call the
I
vote.
just want to clarify on those motions, is that correct? It's not 9, because 9 comes next. 9 comes in the second. Okay.
Okay, so we'll have your closing comments, Mr. Mayor, and then I'll call the vote on the amending motions in reverse order, starting with 10. But as was noted, we're voting on the amendments. Pardon me?
Okay. So what we're going to
Number one
have.
first? Okay. We will vote starting with amending motion 1.
Okay.
Okay.
I will make, go ahead.
I will read it out, yes, thank you.
Motion
Now,
one.
we will vote on amending motion 9 after, when we get to item 2.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the clarity. Okay. So that being said, we're thoroughly follow along here.
So, Mr. Mayor, your opportunity to close on.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
And of course, move your motion,
Okay. will
and then
do.
we'll vote on the
Thank you.
amending motions.
So the only, again, appreciate my colleagues' comments. The two motions, the two amendments I won't be supporting at this time are motions 2 and 10. Just brief reasons. I didn't really give reasons before. I just want.
Just a moment, is there a motion 2 still?
No, 2.
Yeah, no, they've been replaced.
That's me. That's I just said what motions are doing, and then I confused
That's
myself.
okay, there's lots of paperwork
Thank
here.
you. All right.
Okay.
I confused. There we go. Motion 4. The reason I'm not voting for motion 4 and 10, I just want to give just a couple of words. Motion 4. At a time when we're bringing in these changes, these to this rezoning to allow development along malls and corridors to proceed more rapidly, motion 4 puts really a condition and another step into the process, where it says in clause 2 that the site plans submitted must receive approval by the relevant community committee prior to issuance of development permit. That inserts a significant step that could cause significant delays in my mind, and therefore would be really antithetical to the work that we're trying to do to speed up development along malls and corridors. So for that reason, I will not be supporting motion number 4. Motion number 10, though I appreciate my colleague's amendment to include it to be restricted to over 300 units. I still would rather us look at that post March of 2025. I appreciate that no one has said or asserted that I'm not in support of affordable housing. Of course I am, but I really want to see us look at that more so in the new year after we get through the discussion in the next hearing on 4s and 4s. I think we need to keep in mind that right now, for example, there are several projects that I know of that are happening on corridors. They're multifamily projects. They're proceeding, but they have CMHC housing funding. And any project that would receive or seek funding from CMHC as a funding source is required to include affordable units. That's part of the condition. So there's nothing stopping, for example, the future proponents of developing on malls and corridors from seeking CMHC funding, and that would trigger the requirement for affordable units. I'd prefer to see the impact of including inclusionary zoning here. I'd like to see the impact on other of what it's done in other jurisdictions as well, and whether it has slowed or discouraged in any way development. And we certainly want to speed up development right now, and so I think that what we have before us currently, as the original package that our public service has recommended, is really to encourage the speedy development, faster development, easier development of along malls and corridors. Related to the concerns that some have expressed about, the details of the site plans, I remind us all as well that Council just recently, in May of 2023, we adopted brand new development agreement parameters. Those were established through a robust discussion over months. Could have been, I don't know how long it was certainly months, it could have been years, with our staff and the stakeholder development community. There was a council seminar, and then council ultimately had the chance to vote on it. So really everybody had a hand in establishing new and updated development agreement parameters, which are now being used across the city. And so I'm open to discussion about affordable housing being required on malls and corridor sites, but I'd like to have that discussion after, as a matter of a next round, after March of 2025. So for today, I'll conclude with that, and I will then move the motion, Madam Speaker, to restate again that the recommendation of the public service be concurred in as amended through motions 1, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10. And I list them all because I know we're going to vote on them each separately. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll have the vote individually on each motion now. Pardon me?
The main item after?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll call the question on amending motion 1, and that was moved by Councillor Lukes regarding a bird-friendly guidelines for development. All in favor? All in favor, please fly. Okay, please rise. Okay, thank you.
His Worship Mayor Gillingham, Councillors Allard, Brawadi, Chambers, Dobson, Duncan, Eady, Gilroy, Lukes, Mays, Orlico, Rollins, Santos, Schreier, Wyatt. Madam Speaker, Councillor Sharma.
The vote, Madam Speaker, yeas 16, nays 0.
Thank you. Motion 1 passes. Motion 4 is moved by Councillor Chambers, and it speaks to plan approval. All in favor, please rise.
Councillors Chambers, Mays, Orlico, Schreier, Wyatt. Madam Speaker, Councillor Sharma.
Those opposed, please rise.
His Worship Mayor Gillingham, Councillors Allard, Brawadi, Dobson, Duncan, Eady, Gilroy, Lukes, Rollins, and Santos.
Vote, Madam Speaker, yeas 6, nays 10.
Okay. Motion 4 is defeated. Motion 5, moved by Councillor Brawadi regarding service agreements. All in favor, please rise.
His Worship Mayor Gillingham, Councillors Allard, Brawadi, Chambers, Dobson, Duncan, Eady, Gilroy, Lukes, Mays, Orlico, Schreier, Wyatt. Madam Speaker, Councillor Sharma.
Those opposed, please rise.
Councillors Rollins and Santos.
The vote, Madam Speaker, yeas 14, nays 2.
Motion 5 passes. Motion 6, moved by Councillor Eady regarding Land Dedication Reserve Fund policy. All in favor, please rise.
His Worship Mayor Gillingham, Councillors Allard, Brawadi, Chambers, Dobson, Duncan, Eady, Gilroy, Lukes, Mays, Orlico, Rollins, Santos, Schreier, Wyatt. Madam Speaker, Councillor Sharma.
Thank
the vote,
you.
Madam Speaker, yeas 16, nays 0.
Motion 6 is unanimous. It passes. Motion 8, moved by Councillor Duncan regarding map amendment. All in favor, please rise.
His Worship Mayor Gillingham, Councillors Allard, Rawadi, Chambers, Dobson, Duncan, Eady, Lukes, Mays, Orlico, Rollins, Schreier, Wyatt. Madam Speaker, Councillor Sharma.
Those opposed, please rise.
Councillors Gilroy and Santos.
Vote, Madam Speaker, yeas 14, nays 2.
Motion 8 passes. Motion 10 moved by Councillor Orlico regarding affordable housing. All in favor, please rise.
Councillors Duncan, Eady, Gilroy, Mays, Orlico, Rollins, Schreier, Wyatt. Madam Speaker, Councillor Sharma.
Okay. Those opposed, please rise.
His Worship Mayor Gillingham, Councillors Allard, Rawadi, Chambers, Dobson, Lukes, and Santos.
The vote, Madam Speaker, yeas 9, nays 7.
Okay. Motion 10 passes.
Okay. Do you want me to consult?
Okay. Yes, and now you'll put forward the main item as amended, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I'm putting forward the main item as amended with the, we all know kind of, I think,
Yeah, I'll read
my
them out.
supporting reasons. Thank you.
Okay, so the main item as amended?
I get
Yes.
to do my supporting reasons every vote, right?
Yes, you sure
Okay.
can.
These types of reforms are how cities get the most units built the fastest. We have seen that these reforms have successfully unlocked thousands of new units and spurred neighborhood growth along priority transit corridors in North American cities such as Seattle, Los Angeles, and our sister city, Minneapolis, to name a few. These amendments fulfill Action 2.8 of the Council adopted Strategic Priorities Action Plan. These mall sites and corridors already have services, parking, and transit connectivity for new residents. These reforms will encourage the revitalization of underutilized or vacant spaces, contributing to the overall growth and development of the city, while capturing more value and revenue per acre of developed private land. Along with the Transit Master Plan changes coming in 2025, densification along our main transit corridors will change the transportation needs of thousands of Winnipeggers by creating a growing market of potential Winnipeg Transit passengers and reducing the need for additional automobiles on our streets. This plan development overlay was a milestone in Winnipeg's Housing Accelerator Fund application and should provide a significant boost to the city's housing start targets required to meet the program goals. I'll leave it there, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With that, I'll call the vote. All in favor of the item as amended, please rise.
His Worship Mayor Gillingham, Councillors Allard, Rawadi, Chambers, Dobson, Duncan, Eady, Gilroy, Lukes, Mays, Orlico, Rollins, Santos, Schreier, and Madam Speaker, Councillor Sharma.
Those opposed, please rise. If any? Yeah.
Councillor Wyatt.
The vote, Madam Speaker, yeas 15, nays 1.
Item 1 is carried as amended. Mr. Mayor?
Madam Speaker, then, that the public hearing with respect to this application be concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Clerk?
For this one.
Did we call the question?
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Madam Clerk?
Please note that Council has made a final decision on this matter. The corresponding bylaws will be submitted for first reading at the next regular meeting of Council.
Okay. Thank you. On to item 2. Madam Clerk, shall you introduce that, or should we go right into
Can I
it?
just move it?
Sorry. Item 2 is a secondary plan amendment to the Complete Communities Direction Strategy 2.0 bylaw number 119 of 2020, under file SPA of 6 of 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I move that the report of the public service be taken as read.
All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary, carried.
I move that the receipt of the public representations be concluded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary, carried.
I move that recommendation of the public service be concurred in with the following amendment as per motion 9. Can I say it that way?
Yes. Thank you. Okay. So Mayor moves the main item. Do we need to vote on the motion 9 separately? Think so?
No, just all at once. I
Okay.
think.
Okay. Okay, we'll vote separately as we did with the first item. All in favor of motion 9 moved by Councillor Duncan regarding changes to complete communities regarding the employment lands. All in favor? Aye. Contrary? Okay, thank you. That's carried, and we'll record Councillor Gilroy and Councillor Santos in opposition.
Same supporting reason, Madam Speaker,
Yes.
as the first one, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll call the question on item 2 as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Okay. And that's carried. Councillor Wyatt recorded in opposition.
And I move, if I may, Madam Speaker, then, that the public hearing with respect to this application be concluded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? That's carried. Madam Clerk?
Please note that council has made a final decision on this matter. The corresponding bylaw will be submitted for first reading at the next regular meeting of council.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, item 3.
Item number 3 is a secondary plan amendment to the Transcona West Area Structure Plan Bylaw number 215 of 2006 under file SPA 7 of 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I move that the report of the Winnipeg Public Service be taken as read.
All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried.
I move that the receipt of the public representations be concluded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried.
I move that the recommendations of the Winnipeg Public Service be concurred in with the same supporting reasons.
All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? That's carried. Councillor Wyatt noted in opposition.
And I move that the public hearing with respect to this application be concluded with
Do you
gratitude
have
to my
supporting
colleagues.
reasons?
I said, yeah, it's the
same?
same supporting reasons as the last couple of times.
Thank you. You've closed the hearing, Mr. Mayor. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? That's carried. Madam Clerk?
Please note that council has made a final decision on this matter. The corresponding bylaw will be submitted for first reading at the next regular meeting of council.
Thank you. Councillor Rowlands, will you move adjournment?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? That's carried. Thank you. I'd like to close off this hearing. We will be reconvening with our regular council meeting in 15 minutes. Thank you.